How's it going, everybody? I'm your host, Root by Root. With me, my co-host, Dick Tracy, aka Shabzy.
What's up?
Welcome to the Red Chill, your weekly podcast for everything movies, TVs, and everything in between. Welcome to episode 4 of Andor, Recapped and Reviewed, where we're going to recap and review the entire episode and go scene by scene, giving a full breakdown of our thoughts. Before that,
Yes, sir.
what we're going to do is just give our overall spoiler-free thoughts on the episode and discuss a couple of the themes that we feel like came up in this. So, Shabzy, what were your overall thoughts on this episode?
So, right before I talk about my overall thoughts, the first thing I want to mention is that the biggest thing is like this is the first episode that we are actually watching of Andor, which is separate from everything else. So
Yep.
far, even though we reviewed each episode one by one, we watched all of Andor content all at once. And now this is the first viewing of waiting a week, having just one episode, and trying to judge it based on whether it's sufficient to do just one episode. Will it be enough? How will it carry on from a 3 episode premiere? And so a lot of the thoughts are based on that as well.
Yeah, what did you think overall as a
I
standalone
I
episode compared to having 3 at one go?
I absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was uh like it stood on its own. But here are some of the things that I noted. The first thing I realized was that this episode almost felt like a first episode of a season 2. And I think we discussed in the review of episode 3 that almost felt like the end of season 1 as opposed to the end of a random episode 3 in like a 9 or 10, whatever, how many episodes this is going to be.
And I was saying that I was hoping it was going to be this, where after the first 3 episodes, like because it felt like we had a climax and an end to that section, that like we would get something completely new and the beginning of a whole new adventure, it feels like. And
Right.
yeah, I agree. I totally loved it, and it was exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And also, but another thing that I just took a quick note of was that the fact that we were discussing that whether one episode will be enough to like keep you engaged and keep you wanting more, as opposed to like watching like an hour and a half of content altogether. I went back and did a quick timestamp check. So the first episode was 39, the second was 35, the third was 40, and now the fourth is 45. So clearly they've like at least in one between episode 2 and episode 4, there's been a 10-minute increase in the episode length. And I think that was just enough. And that's kind of what I suggested, that having seen all this, that maybe instead of doing 3 episodes, they could have done like 2 45-minute episodes. And it yeah, but I think that's a question we'll get into more once we're done with the whole review and we can like judge accordingly.
Yeah, and I think also this was another episode that was overall, you could call it talky, but I am completely down with it now. Where on episode 2, I was still wondering if it's worth it. Is this too slow? Is this not enough? Where in this episode, there wasn't really any action, but I was completely taken by it. I was fully invested, and it had me wanting more, but also I also was completely okay with having this one episode because it ends on such a high, and it does one of my favorite things in heist movies specifically, where it just leaves me like I'm just ready to see now where this goes, and what will happen next. So loved it.
It's amazing that that you said that this episode, like I honestly didn't even think about that. And that's something like I brought up so many times in episode 2, and I even wrote a note again to remind myself of like, was episode 2 too tedious or not?
Yeah.
And this time it didn't even now that I think about it, you're right. There was no action scenes. All of the scenes were just people talking to each other. But and I think one of the things about that is that episode 2, they were all still in the same place with the same characters, with the same people, with like
True.
a tiny new introduction to Stellan Skarsgård. But other than that, they were just all in the same place in this dire, depressing place. And now we're like introduced to like so many different types of places and people that I think that kept me so engaged that I honestly didn't even realize that. And this episode being 10 minutes longer than episode 2, it should have felt its length where it actually didn't. So like
Yeah,
I
it's
guess
true.
like subconsciously I didn't I appreciated the pacing and yeah.
No, definitely the different locations helped a lot. And also I think this time the stakes were there are like clear and ready, and there was a momentum to everything that was happening, versus episode 2 was a little bit more like we don't know actually what's going on, and we're just getting to know these characters. So yeah, it was really cool to see.
I agree. And here's a fun fact that I wanted to just that I noticed again, and I forgot to mention this when I saw in episode 1 that the show is created and written by a guy named Tony Gilroy.
Yeah.
I didn't know who that was, and the first thought that went through my mind was, is he related to Dan Gilroy, the guy who directed Nightcrawler?
Okay. Is he?
And and I then completely forgot about that. And then when this episode ended, it said directed by Dan Gilroy. So I was like, oh, let me go check if. So Dan Gilroy is apparently the younger brother of Tony Gilroy.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. So because
So
yeah,
this was directed by Dan Gilroy. I didn't even
yeah,
notice.
yeah,
So the guy who did Nightcrawler, that explains a lot.
exactly. I was just gonna say that a lot of the shots and the way the scenes move and like the slow moving long shots,
Also the
like
suspense of like
yes,
there's not even, it's suspenseful just by the way of the how the
yeah,
people are talking to each other, and like
right,
it's yeah, it was kind of crazy that it's so many times I thought to myself like this is, especially for Star Wars, I was like this feels so different and I kind of like it.
right, exactly.
And it was showing a lot of things that like I hadn't like I don't think we've seen as much in live action Star Wars, where like
Mm,
really cool to see where like
yeah,
it's expanding the world in really interesting areas.
yeah. Yeah, agreed. And yeah, so I thought that was a fun little nugget. And then I obviously had to check who directed the first 3 episodes. And it's by a guy named Toby Haynes. And I
Okay.
thought I recognized that. And then I went and checked. The only thing that I recognized him from, that he directed one of my favorite episodes of Black Mirror called USS Callister. I don't know
Oh,
if you remember
nice.
that one.
Yeah, I know this the
Right?
Star Trek copy.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. That he did something like that, and now he did the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, I have to say the look of this episode was immaculate. There's only
Yes.
one shot that I'm going to mention later where it was kind
Okay.
of like the CGI was a bit took me out of it because everything else was so perfect.
Mm,
But also I think it was more like a design choice more than the CGI. But yeah, like all the different environments, like the yeah, it looked incredible. Like the whole time I was thinking like this looks like straight up, it looks like a big budget movie,
yeah.
but the way it's paced, it feels like they don't make that anymore. Like I couldn't
Right.
go into a cinema and get to see something that looks this expensive but is such a character piece. And I don't know.
Right.
It's very cool to see. Where I was like, you like even a Netflix movie when like you might be get some like might be able to get something that's as much based on the characters, but like the look of the show is just yeah, on another level.
I agree. I completely agree. All the shots, like it completely takes you out, and and I think I know which scene you're talking about that stood out, because I'm pretty sure we're on the same page, but we'll discuss it when we discuss it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I made sure, and I was thinking maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but But now that you
It
mention it,
stuck
I was
out.
like, I'm definitely we will talk about it. And I
It,
want to ask, and I wanted to ask like why, what their logic behind that would be, because so far we've seen them be fully formidable at how they've shown every single kind of scene. So I'm pretty
yeah,
sure that was by design, like you said.
exactly, because it
Yeah,
stood
yeah.
out so much
Yeah,
because everything else was so perfect.
exactly.
Where
Yeah,
suddenly
yeah.
it was just like,
We'll
oh, are
talk
we
about
back in the prequel
it.
era
Yeah,
now?
yeah, no, 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 no. Don't spoil it. But yeah, I'm totally with you on that. But okay. All right. So yeah. So that was a fun little nugget, and then some of the themes that I noticed were, obviously there's a big theme of self-sacrifice for like the greater good versus self-interest and survival,
Okay.
right? And then there's some like comparisons of like how different kind of teams function from like which we'll get into more later. We'll just mention these things and then we'll get into it as they come along during the scenes,
Okay.
right? And like how people um like how a committee functions and how everyone interacts within it, and like a chain of command, and what are the differences between our characters of one kind of class and another kind of class, and then
Yeah, I
some
totally had that
similar
thought too.
yeah, some similarities between Cass and my boy Cyril Karn, and some differences in social classes, right? And then yeah,
All right. Well, how about we give it a rating and then we can get into the
right.
spoiler section of our pod.
I agree.
So, out of 1 to 10, what would you give it?
I will give it an 8.9.
See, I was like
I was almost giving
contemplating.
it 9, but
I was between an 8.5 and a 9. I was like thinking
right,
8.5 because it was it was either the beginning or like up to a middle section of a story, depending. I don't know what they're going to do next episode, if their payoff is already going to come, or if there's like more to the setup of what's going to happen next. But like that's why I was thinking maybe I go 8.5. But at the same time, for what it was, for not having action, for being so spellbinding. Like I mean, I really was like at the beginning. I actually, when I put it on at first, I was like kind of distracted, and it took me a second. But like even after the first scene, I was like, oh shit! I went back a little bit and rewatched it, and I was like, and I was in, like
yeah,
all the way through. Where I didn't even feel the time, like you said. So I think
yeah.
I would for that. I think I would give it a 9. Let's see
Oh
if I
shit! Damn.
change my mind after we go through
Yeah.
it scene by scene.
Right.
But yeah, I think this is another amazing episode. I think it
Yeah.
was as much fun to watch as episode 3, and it didn't even have that giant action scene that was like
Right.
half of the episode for episode 3, and it wasn't
Right.
even like a payoff or something, anything like that. It was like we said, it felt almost like a completely fresh start,
Yeah.
and it was yeah. I don't know. I had a really good time with it.
I agree.
But
It got my juices flowing. No,
yeah,
and from a point of view of like having watched 3 episodes at the same time in just this one location, and everything's dire, and like even though it was really good, I was just like, okay, what's next, right? What are we gonna do from here? And now just this like it just felt like this fresh new thing where I'm like interested in the characters. I'm like interested in where the story is gonna go, where these things, and knowing where obviously Cassian ends up like much later on. I'm just interested in all these other characters, which I didn't think it would happen. Like, because I don't care anymore about anything, in life. And now suddenly I'm like watching this, and I'm like, oh, dude, I can't wait to see what Karn's up to now. I can't wait to see what Luthen's up to now, and all these other new people,
yeah,
and
and
yeah,
also excited to see where the show goes. Like
yeah,
after it does such a hard turn after 3 episodes, where it's
right,
like so fresh feeling, and we
Yeah.
have 12 episodes of the show.
Ooh.
Excited to see what all could happen next. And yeah, I think our verdict in the end, I think you agree, is totally works as a weekly episode show.
Yes, I agree.
You know, if this is the quality we're going to get,
Yeah.
totally down with it. And it totally had me wanting more, but also not feeling like I didn't get enough.
Right. I agree.
But okay, so that's our spoiler free section. Let us now go scene by scene into the recap and get into the proper spoilers.
Let's
Take
do
it
it.
away.
All right. So we're going to start with, I just wanted to mention one small thing about last week's recap. That two things actually I just forgot to mention. One was that, and which will come into play later on in this. That's why I wanted to just quickly mention that. One was that the character of Cyril Karn was,
Yeah.
I felt that it was so well written out of out of all the other characters, that it was like you could sort of piece together like who he might be as a person, like, and that's what we were doing. We were like always like discussing like how what kind of a person is he, what is he feeling, and like you could sort of piece together like his backstory, and like, you know, and I sort of I went forward with that when later on his scene comes, and
Also,
and I assumed his backstory a little bit, and we'll
s-
talk about that. Yeah.
for having such a small part in this episode and like one line, very memorable. Like
Yes, he was
progresses
he's
characters so much. A lot of this
yes.
episode was really like expanding characters even more on the level where it's like,
Yeah.
holy shit, like they
Yeah.
did that so slowly in the first 3 episodes, where it's here like from the first scene, and like every conversation just
Yeah.
makes every character deeper and gives it more layers, and you're just like, wow, okay, I'm totally down. There's every
I
time
agree.
there's something new where you're just like, okay, that's actually a cool angle.
I totally agree with that. And the MacGuffin was stuff set up. I don't know if people know what that is. It's a plot device that moves the thing along that everyone has to look for, which was the Star Path unit that Cassian and Luthen couldn't get it from when they started the fight in that warehouse place.
Yeah.
And yeah, so once that happened, everybody, like, for people, that's the MacGuffin that was set up, that I'm sure will bring our characters back to Andor, because that was to Marlon. Marlon?
Marlana, I think.
Marlana.
Molana.
Marlana.
Yeah.
Because I kept wondering this whole episode, was that was all that sort of characterization for the other characters that Morlana required, because we really like went deep into their characters and felt so much emotion for them, and then it's like but I'm sure because of the MacGuffin that comes into play later, where we'll get into it.
Also,
So
there's several
sorry.
seasons of the show, so they just set it up that whenever they use them, they're ready.
Right.
They're just like a loaded gun where they're fully set up, and when they want to use them, we all are going to be on board.
But in terms of just like basing it on just one season and episode by episode, I really hope that they go back to it within the season, because you can't make audiences spend so much time with characters that mean so little within the story that you're trying to tell, which is season one. Because then those characters could be developed if they're introduced later on in seasons, and it's up to the writers to develop them during those episodes and not like waste the audience's time with all this. Because yeah, that's my opinion on it.
My ideal outcome would be, since there's 12 episodes, the first arc was 3, so I feel like they could do 4 different arcs in it.
Right.
It would be cool if we get this new arc and we get one more, and then the final 3 episodes is the first 3 arcs all coming together, where they all interconnect.
Climax of all 3.
Where you find it all makes sense. Where at first it feels kind of like Alice down the rabbit hole, and you're just like, wow, what? Okay, it's completely flipped again after like 3 episodes or something like that, and you're like, okay, I don't know where we're going. Like, that's where I kind of like, I feel like they're trying to bring in the spy angle that way, where like nothing, you don't know who's who, nothing is what it seems. You don't know what the show is. You don't know what's going to happen next. It leaves the audience guessing. And it would be
Right.
just a great payoff just to be at the end. Like, oh, it seemed like it was all very random,
Right.
but in the end, it all actually interconnected and made sense.
And I have a pretty cool analogy for that. You could look at the 3 acts as the 3 arcs of 3 episodes each as the 3 acts in like Pulp Fiction, where you have like 3 separate stories that are told
Yeah.
separately, and then it all comes together. Which
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it has been done in a lot of other things, but I thought,
But how often
right,
has it been done where it's not intercut, where you're not
right,
seeing how often is it where you see 3 completely different stories in a sense? Like, it's not really a completely different story, but it the tone and energy and
right.
the push of the whole show has kind of changed in a way. So
Yeah, that I agree. Yeah, it would be cool if they did that, or if they just do it in like a normal way, where at least they have some kind of at least payoff to those characters, like where we should, because if they're not, I mean, obviously they will, but all right, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. All right, here we go. So we start with the first scene is with Cass and Luthen in their spaceship, and it was really cool to see the spaceship go into hyperdrive, warp drive. I forget which is the correct one.
it's hyperdrive, hyperspeed, light speed.
Oh, right. Hyperspeed. That's the one. And
Now you confused me as well.
all right. Actually, I think it's hyperdrive. But yeah,
I think it's light speed,
and
isn't it?
no, light speed is for like in our terms, but like in Star Wars terms.
Okay.
I know there's one for Star Wars and one for Star Trek.
I should
and,
know
and,
this,
I,
but
and I
like,
forget. Yeah, that's why I asked
you threw me
you.
a curveball with that warp drive.
Warp drive. Right, but yeah, and in this, I love how like every time like you see like Cass, whenever he's walking around the spaceship, everything feels like foreign and new and alien to him, where he's just never, even though he's been alive all this time, it always goes back to like his first time when he was a kid in the new spaceship, and then he's like totally baffled by like hyperspeed, and it was really cool to see like the hyperspeed perspective from like inside. I don't think we've seen that, where you're in the middle of hyperspeed and you just sort of you always seen it like start and then wherever it exits.
I think we've
You
seen
seen
it.
it? Okay, all right.
So
I'm not even sure anymore what all these things. But okay, so they're talking about, they have like a really good dialogue about like their perspective and differences on like the opinions of the rebellions, and Cass mentions a bunch of them, and Luthen mentions a bunch of them, and they're both saying, "Yeah, isn't it all the same thing?" Yes, we're going.
I like before we get into the conversation before that with the ship, I like the fact that Cassian was like, I've flown a ship like this, but I've never seen one do that and go this fast.
Right.
So like, it's some like special ship that like Luthen is riding over there.
Yeah, like, and that's a cool thing to notice, is that all this kind of like weird space technology, future technology exists, but it's still like there's still a difference between the technology that exists for like poor people and technology that exists for like really expensive shit that can do like it's not that like technology or no technology, where if you have tech then it can, then all spaceships can do that. But it's like there's the cheap kind of spaceship also, within this universe.
Well, it's either that. I totally think those themes were being played with in this episode, but it's either that or that Luthen customized this ship, kind of like how Mandalorian got his customized ship, where like he's he's obviously having like a double life, and we don't know everything about him, but maybe it's just like, he uses the ship for his special mission. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, they're just talking about like the difference between how one wants to fight and one wants to survive, which is what we talked about self-sacrifice for the greater good versus, especially knowing that Cass, how he ends up in Rogue One. So we know that that's going to be his character arc even for this, where he starts off with just stealing shit just to get away from this, and he's always in debt and he's always looking for survival. And then the best thing happens, where it's something you kept mentioning throughout the first 3 episodes. And Cass is telling Luthen, I fought in Mimban when I was 16, and there was only 50 of us who were left out of like a lot of people. And Luthen immediately calls him out on lying and says, you entered as a cook and you lived because you ran.
Yeah.
And I immediately thought of what you kept saying. You're like, is he always telling the truth? Like especially with how he stole the Star Path unit. And yeah, maybe you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's again playing on those themes. Like, we don't know anything if anything these people are saying is true. I think Luthen is trying very hard in this episode to make us, the audience, and Andor, like, believe that, like, okay, he's not full of shit, but at the same time, who knows, you know? And I like that. It just keeps playing with that, where they haven't really made it clear yet in terms of like the story hasn't needed the fact that everybody's not really who they are, but you know, it's letting you know that it's coming.
So yeah, and I thought that was a little similarity that I kind of drew between him and Cyril Karn, where they have this facade and this sort of this persona that they're trying to portray of being like harder or more like badass and like, you know, I can survive on my own, that type of thing. But then as we are getting to know more and more that they're probably not just lying to other people, but they may even believe it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then we get on to how Luthen starts explaining about their shared hatred for the Empire, and why, even though the conclusion is going to be the same, he says that regardless of what you steal, they're going to hang you with the same rope. And then he sort of gives his offer that isn't it better to fight for something greater than to keep running until they've catch you. And Cass is sort of like, no, it's better to live. And Luthen sort of gives him the proposal of like, we're gonna be stealing an Imperial payroll, and offers Cass, I think, 200,000 credits for it. And Cass accepts.
I like that before, at the very beginning, Cass was just like, I am just taking the right. I'm gonna get out of here. You're crazy. I don't know who you are. Like, what is this ship? Screw all of this. I'm getting out. And then Stellan Skarsgård starts just killing it, as he always does. Where I think he's amazing in this episode. Again,
he is so great.
Like, I was thinking when I was watching him, I was like, it's so great that we can have actors like this in TV shows now, where he brings
and in a Star Wars TV show.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, like he fits so well into this universe, even though it's like a whole new section of it that feels really new and fresh. But wow, every scene in this episode makes you just want to know more about what is he all about. And when he is, like I was saying, when he is trying to convince Cass, it feels like he's trying to convince us, the audience, as well. And because he's so good, you do. And then later on, you see the other scenes, and you're again like, holy shit, okay, I thought we can trust him, but like, can we now? And then like, it keeps flip-flopping, and I love it. So good.
I agree. I totally agree. And what I wanted to mention about this scene was that it's so like great that like this is like the subject matter is pretty dark and adult, and I keep comparing it to Rogue One, because that was like some of the biggest people, like if people were trying to defend Rogue One, they would always say like, oh, you just didn't like it because Star Wars tried to be serious and it tried to be like a gritty war drama. But the problems with that was that the characters all fell flat. And the moment I saw this one scene, I was like, my God, I've seen Cassian and Luthen, two basically new characters, in like 2 scenes together, and they already have so much more chemistry and charisma than Cass had in like the whole movie with the girl. Like I don't even remember her name. Like that's how boring she was, and everything was just like depressing. And this is all depressing and it's dark. Like it's way darker than Rogue One. But the way they like the dialogue has like energy and like weight to it, and the way like they deliver the lines. I just wanted to really mention
Uh,
that it's so much better than
all the characters feel way more three-dimensional than a lot of characters in
exactly.
all of Star
Yeah.
Wars, and it makes it feel real. And I think before we go to the next episode, I also wanted to just mention that like it from the beginning when the Andor logo comes on and there's like way more drums and the music is so much more intense. It's like letting
Right.
you know like okay, now we're on this journey. Now let's get ready. And then
Right.
from the beginning of this episode, it felt like such a flip from what was there before, where it's just like even though we were still in that little ship and like it really after the scene you're really like okay what this is like a whole new vibe going on. It was already from the scene where it's like okay this is like getting intense now. Like
Yeah.
something now it's
Exactly.
getting serious, and
Yeah.
the stakes like already are getting high when he's telling him what the plan is, and
Yeah.
Cass's reaction is like what.
Yeah. I agree. Exactly. It's like it's so good. Just the first scene itself, it completely like hooks you into the episode where even you mentioned at the beginning where you had to like go back and like just like rewatch some of the scenes where and the thing I like the most is that even the things that they're talking about is like so like heavy and stuff like that, they still have humor in it, and there's still some levity to it, but it's not like forced jokes like Marvel jokes or like where someone is just trying to inject humor into a dialogue where they're like, oh no, we have to have humor. Here it's like just character driven where and character based humor where they're just having a banter off of each other, but just the stuff that they're actually talking about is like really dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. And now on to scene two, which I was really wanted to ask you as a Star Wars fan. We go into, and I'm doing this on purpose, guys. We go into Coruscant, the capital of the galaxy.
Oh yeah, we've seen it a couple of times. I never remember the name,
Oh,
but
really? You don't know the thing of young Anakin pronouncing it Coruscant in his.
no, I don't remember that.
Oh, okay.
I remember that we had seen it before because at first also it looks like different in this show a bit. It's way more
Right.
uh, pale and like colorless,
Mm.
But yeah, that was cool to see.
Yeah. I was like, oh, like the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my God. And I don't know if this is what you were talking about, or maybe when it comes back later, but the um the way it looked, it kind of took me out for a second, and I was like, oh no, are we gonna get prequel vibes now? Or I'm like, are they
The
just
city
trying to?
itself.
Yeah,
Oh, I actually
in
really like the later part of the city. I really like when we go
right.
with Karn and see where he
Yes,
lives.
yes, that's the part I like. But the first introduction to it, and obviously the scene later on, which I won't talk about right now, but
Yeah, no, it was another
yeah,
one that popped out
okay.
to me.
Okay. Then we'll talk about it. So now we're introduced to the Imperial Sector Bureau, and we see a blonde woman walking in, and then we're introduced to this whole. It's like a staff meeting with the chief, and we see how the bureau functions up on the Imperial level, which is we were at the corporals, which was like the middle level with the blues,
Yeah,
and everyone's trying to act harder than they are, but they're all like sort of out of shape, and we were discussing like why is that like that. Now we understand.
now we're at the
And
whites.
yes, exactly, we're not at the white level, the white collar. It's like a racist.
Well, actually, yeah, blue collar, white collar is a bit on the nose,
Right.
but
Yeah, there we go. But I guess they have to make it like some things more on the nose so that it's easier to connect for like people like me, where because there's so much new stuff like in terms of the names and what things are called, and it's like having someone named lieutenant or deputy chief officer. I'm like, okay, I understand what that means. The dumb person like me, I get it. It's good.
I found it interesting that they have a navy and they call it the
Right.
navy.
Right. He
Uh,
does say that. Yeah, that's true.
I thought that was an interesting choice. Where like again, it's probably what you're saying. It gives us something to like cling on to and like connect with. But it
Right.
was still immediately I was like, wait, okay, but they're in space. Well, what does the Navy do? And how
Oh,
come?
right. I actually didn't even connect that.
And then how come it's called the Navy? Like I don't even know why
Oh
it's called the
my God.
Navy, but it seems like
That's so
so
true.
coincidental that they named it the same thing.
Oh my God. I actually didn't even realize that.
Like, do
Oh
they
my
like
God. That
fly
is
the
so
ships to
hilarious.
other planets and then they drop the Navy down? But at that point, why wouldn't they just use the ship? There's the spaceships. Like, why do they need
Right.
specifically a fleet for water?
Maybe Coruscant has a lot of water.
I guess
Right?
maybe.
They're the capital of the galaxy, and from what we can tell, like they're like the richest. I'm guessing one of the richest people. So that
But
city might just have its own water and its own navy.
you would still
But they
think that.
do, but they do mention it that call the navy for like even if you have to go to Morlana, I guess.
You'd think they would
Right.
have something like Thor in the Asgardians, where they just have ships that can also
Oh,
fly.
right, right. This will be the opposite. This will be like spaceships that can also go in the water. But I'm guessing where I don't know where the water would be.
But yeah, it was partly it was cool to hear. But at the same time, it was a bit distracting. Where it was just like, hold up, I have some questions now.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Also,
That I didn't even realize
the
it.
look of that office, it looked so old school. Like even the film
Mm,
grain and everything.
right.
Loved the look of it, and I think
Super cold.
yeah, that too. It felt like something from the 70s. Like
Yeah.
felt like the old movies, but a little bit up. I don't know, because of the cinematography was different, so it didn't really look like
Mm,
from the movies, but it felt like from the same time. And I think it's more obvious later. Like I thought, like in the second scene with the same captain and the blonde woman that's in the scene.
right.
But I really loved it in the way of like I kind of like finding out how this works technically. It's something that
Right.
like a lot of Star Wars movies just don't deal with, where like the technicalities of like how would it actually function, and
Mm,
what a the what's the bureaucracy of this, because it is an
yeah.
empire that is taking over the galaxy. There has to be some bureaucracy that has to be taken care of. So I love seeing that, but at the same time, I was thinking, if you would take the same scene and you don't change the dialogue or anything, but you would just set it in like an office that looks like from The Office or something, and everybody's just wearing white shirts and a tie, it would totally change it, and you probably would
Yeah.
not give a shit about what's going on.
Yeah.
Where you just like now it's just like I'm watching an office meeting, like or like later
Yeah.
on, it's like just two people met at the water cooler, and now we're
Mm,
just like listening to them talk. But because of what it looks like and the way everybody's talking and the
yeah.
everything, it's just like, yo, I'm still down with it. But like I had that thought where it's just like, I feel like it's the look and everything around it that's making this interesting right now, but I don't care.
No, but also like the things that they're actually talking about, like and like you said, like that we're being introduced to like sort of the upper end of the bureaucratic nature of the empire, which is sort of cool to see. And I think it's like similar. It's kind of like maybe what George Lucas was trying to do with his prequels, where he's trying to talk about politics and all this boring stuff, and everybody was like, "Dude, nobody cares about that in a Star Wars movie." And but the problem with that was that not only did he not do it well, he also added in like just the same amount of childish nonsense in it, and with the way the movie looked, everything just fell completely off. Where in this it's like we already know that it's like it is going to be this dark adult type of situation, and now we're 3 episodes deep, where you're right, in a sense, when I look at it, it's like I want to know what's going on. Even though this is like a morning meeting that I'm
Yeah,
watching, which
exactly.
it should be the most boringest thing in the world, and it kind of is, like you said, like in like the first two three. So I'll just mention this real quickly, where you see that I'm just going to call him the chief because I forgot what his. I don't think they mention his position, but he's the head, right,
Yeah.
of the thing, and he walks in, and you see a full a circle of like officers just sitting there for a morning meeting, and he just starts asking each person about their thing, and he's very strict. They're very disciplined, and it shows how the bureau works. And in the first couple of things, it's just like, what are you guys talking about? Like, he's like,
He's
and
also
then
talking very efficiently, where like it seems
yes,
like time is money, you know, like just
yeah,
very quickly get to the point, get through it.
yeah. He's very 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 concise and very straightforward, and he's very strict and very stern, and you can tell that most people are scared even though they are trying not to be.
And again, looks like
Yeah,
he's from the 1970s.
yes, and also some important dialogue about like he asks people, he's like, what do we do here, who are we doing, what is our purpose? And someone, so the blonde woman that we are introduced to, Dedra, who's also referred to later on as Mira, which I thought might confuse Aquaman fans, but so but and she sort of answers the verbatim thing that's in the textbook, and he's like, very good, very good. So we get some character. So I love how all the dialogue is written like that, where even expository dialogue and lines is always delivered like it's integrated into natural dialogue. There isn't a scene where the captain is explaining to the person and he tells them exactly what they do. It's like it's part of the whole flow of the conversation. And along with understanding what the bureau actually does and what they actually think they do, like what the chief's perspective on that is, we also get like character development of like, okay, so Dedra is probably the kind of person who's read all the textbooks. She's like super intelligent. Like, we already get that just from her answering this question. And I love that about it, where you're not like spoon-fed information, but it's like you just sort of naturally learn everything as the plot is happening and as people are conversing with each other.
Yeah, and again, full of detail also, where they
Yeah.
take the time to putting little character moments in that
Yes.
don't take up much time, but they didn't have to do it.
Yeah. And you sort of the chief sort of explains that no, we're actually like, we're healthcare, we're not like armed forces, and they look at rebels and all these kind of people as germs infecting them. So that's a good perspective to see how like empire like their mindset is, and how you can go back in history and have any political social commentary on. But it's good to see like where their mindset is in terms of how they actually view all these lower class and rebellion type of people.
It reminded me a little bit of Agent Smith and his talk with Morpheus. Of
I'm so glad you
humanity.
brought that up because I have another Matrix reference that's going to come later on.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with this. I actually didn't even think about that. But that's amazing. I'll get back on that. And also, we're introduced to Blevin, who's also a superior officer within the thing.
Okay.
Which is the black officer.
Oh yeah, correct.
Yeah, his name is Blevin. Okay, I'm just gonna, because I made sure I'm just not gonna say black person, blonde woman. That's how I wrote my notes down, and then I went back and rewatched the episode to do the recap. And I made sure to get the people, except for the chief. I couldn't find his name.
He was probably in the credits, but
Right.
still good.
I'm avoiding looking at credits now because
But
it gives away too much. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think this show specifically is been interesting to see what kind of names they come up with. Like
Yes.
Blevin is again kind of like it's Devin, but Blevin
Or Kevin.
or Kevin, yeah, like.
And then they have Tim and Willie, but like with the few spelling changes with an extra
So
M
let's
without
see
an
who else,
E.
can't wait who else is going to show up.
And then I didn't write the names of the other people down, just to let you know. Just like whenever we have singular characters, that's how I wrote it down.
There was
I
the
might mention it
moment
later.
where later on the new characters get introduced really quickly.
Yes, one by one. Yeah.
And my thought was like, how is Cass going to learn these names so quickly?
Exactly.
I can't even learn it so quick. She's just like bam, 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 bam,
Yeah, man,
and just like
that's this, that's that, that's this.
okay.
And also the fact that, I was thinking about this, and then I realized, I was like, but wait a second. The biggest character in Star Wars name is Luke. It's the blandest white person name. And his sister's name is Leia. But his father's name is Anakin.
But
okay,
it's Skywalker.
Right. That's true.
And it was supposed to be Star Killer before. But
Oh, really?
yeah, that was the original name in the script, as
Oh.
far as I remember. That's why there's Starkiller Base in the new movies.
Mm.
But there was a whole discussion this week that we can do at some point where on Reddit the question came up. It started with who's the coolest Jedi? And then from there the discussion evolved to is Luke Skywalker cool?
Oh.
That we can do a whole part on that sometime.
Yeah, why not? Break it down. I love Mark Hamill, so I'll go into that.
No, Mark Hamill is great, but the character Luke, if you break him down, is he cool?
That's true.
Yeah, I was like, I had to think about it.
Mira with his sister.
Next
Mira with
time.
his sister, so we have to.
Is that cool?
I don't know. You have to really watch what we say now. We're in 2022, you know. I wish this was 20 years ago, because then it would just straight up been like, no, that wasn't cool. That would have been the answer. But now we're in 2022.
How long till they bring incest back to Star Wars?
All right, let's reel it back in, okay? I don't know. They might do it in this show. Why not, right? They've introduced
this could be the show for it in terms of like the maturity of it.
But to be fair, they didn't know they were brother sisters. So
did George Lucas know is the question.
You're right. Well, good thing George Lucas isn't attached to this or anything Star Wars anymore.
I eventually they're gonna run out of things to bring back, and then they're like, "Here it is.
Here it is.
It's part of Star Wars.
Right.
You know, like you can't deny it."
That's true.
I don't know.
They might do it in like 20 years for the next 40th trilogy. But okay.
I'm sure somebody already did it in a parody, but okay.
In a porn parody, maybe.
Exactly. But yes. Where were we?
Okay, office. So we finished that office thing, and remember what the office setting kind of was, because we're gonna come back. I'm gonna make some comparisons between that and some scenes later on. So now we're back to the spaceship with Luthen and Cassian, and they're landing on a place called Aldhani, which is the name of the episode.
Or Greenland.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it could be Greenland actually. Or Iceland, because Iceland's supposed to be really great.
Oh yeah, Iceland. Either way,
Greenland is the frozen one, so it's probably Iceland.
That is so confusing.
Maybe it's the Sweden. Maybe like Stellan Skarsgård just took him back to his city or something.
I never thought about that. So Iceland is green.
Yeah,
but
that's
Greenland is ice.
Right.
Okay.
That's the joke of the whole thing.
They should work that out. It's like, let's just switch. Anyways, I thought it was very cool to see again a completely new looking environment, which I think Rogue One kind of started. Where it's just like when they were on the beach with the palm trees, and it's just like I never seen Star Wars on the beach. So it was like I've never seen Star Wars in Iceland. So looked beautiful again.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And again, amazing. Just like you can tell they were actually there.
Yeah, the locations look real, and obviously there's like the surroundings are really cool, and everything felt natural. And one thing I noticed was like how the tone is actually shifting in this episode from what it was in the first three, but it's also in a way where it's still like the adult themed series, the adult themed show, but it's like the tone is sort of reflective of the environment we're in.
Yeah.
Where the color, even the color palette changes, which in Rogue One it never changed. Even though we were at the beach, it always looked like a gray blanket over everything, you know, or like this mustard color. I don't know.
I would almost say there's more color in Rogue One than in this show.
Really?
Where even like the cities and everything is very muted. Where even like when we're in the green, it's not like a lush, bright green. It's just like, you know, muted kind of. I don't want to call it because it's not a dirty green, but it's more muted. Is I think the best way to call it.
I looked at it. Maybe I actually maybe don't even remember Rogue One then properly.
Rogue One definitely had its own kind of color grading as well. But I think overall, when I think of it, I can remember colors much more. like the orange of the planet with Forrest Whitaker, for example, versus the base, which is very blue when we're talking to Tarkin,
They
versus the
all
beach.
seem like grayish, bluish, brownish. Like in my mind, every time I think of Rogue One, that's how I sort of remember the color palette. It was like a gradient of like blue, gray, uh, light brown. You know, it was always
Yeah.
like, you know, that's the problem where everything. And in this, even though you're like for you they were muted, but for me, I think just compared to where we were in like Morlana, and then I think it like I think like now when I think about it, they do, like we were talking about how it wasn't like lush green and stuff, but just compared to the different environments within the show,
Oh yeah, totally.
like the color of the environment and also like the tone of the characters changes.
I mean, that was straight when we landed on that planet. It was us also landing on that, where we're like, okay,
Yeah,
now we are
exactly.
completely somewhere else, and it was
Right.
fully felt.
Yeah. And right before they land, I wanted to make a mention that Cass also trimmed his beard with a knife, and he looked really handsome after that. Man, did you notice that?
But how did he?
Dude,
but
his entire look changed.
but how come he still had like a stubble, like a 3 day
Yeah,
stubble?
because the knife wasn't that sharp.
I guess I feel like it should have
Yeah,
been more patchy at that point. Like it was pretty perfectly like a 3 day kind of beard. I don't know.
he's been doing it for a long time.
Maybe I was overthinking it, but I thought it was a little
No.
weird. Where like
Maybe I was
he's
too distracted by how handsome he looked.
and then at this, I understood that he's probably trying to get rid of it because that's how they saw him last. But at the same time, when he popped up as the hologram when they were looking for him, he was without the beard.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really I didn't fully understand why he was doing that. If it was just because when they were shooting, he just had a different hairstyle or something. I don't know.
Or I think it was just like um it was just he just wanted to shave. Like he some beard grew, and then he was going to shave one day, and then he got caught up in that plot where he, like, at the brothel, and he's like, oh, I got 10 minutes. Let me just wash my face, shave it,
It-
before I go on this mission.
It's his work look.
And yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, and here's an important nugget where um Luthen asks him to pick a name for the next 3 days for this mission, and he picks Clem. Now I'm confused because I'm not sure if we have heard the name, if we've heard the name Clem in the last 2 episodes. Obviously, I figured out who Clem is based on the credits and the subtitles, but I don't think we've heard the name Clem so far.
I don't think so.
I
Well,
don't think so either.
wasn't
And
it
this,
in the subtitles?
yeah, well, it was in the subtitles, but I'm just saying, like, based on dialogue and characters,
Yeah.
like we've heard Marva, we've heard all the people's names that
Marva
we need to
didn't
know.
call him by his name?
No, she didn't. That's the thing.
Okay.
And when he mentions it this time, it kind of made me rethink your your prediction of maybe the guy might be Cass's father, maybe,
Yeah.
So the fact that he uses his name, we might find out later if there's any significance to him actually using the name Clem, or was it just like, oh, I know this name and the audience knows this character, so I'll just pick this name.
But the audience
Right.
doesn't really know that character.
That's my point. So maybe that has some significance, because we might find out later why he picks Clem and not just some other random name, right? He could pick.
Yeah.
It's a Star Wars thing. He could pick any name.
Should we mention again what it was, or keep that?
I guess we should just leave it if maybe no one's watched the previous thing, so we should
Okay,
just
so
leave it as a
basically,
spoiler, right?
in the last episode, we found out that
Or
in
no,
the
no, no, no,
credits,
no. I'm saying
yeah,
I'm saying let's leave it.
I'm
Oh,
not
okay,
gonna
okay,
say.
okay.
I'll just let him
Okay,
know.
okay.
In the last episode, we found out in the credits who Cassian's father is, and we're going to leave it at that.
Well, we don't know if it's his father or not, but we did find some relation to some characters.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
there was some
But
Easter eggs in there.
we still don't know if that's going to be actually Cassian's quote unquote father.
Yeah. Which
But
again,
but
our
but
point was that it was just interesting that they already put it in the credits.
yes, exactly. Yes.
Like, was that a mistake or was it on purpose?
Or maybe it was just like that's what they just like they have to do, maybe like legally, or like maybe just based on, or maybe they just film the credits, just like they film the credits and then they just attach, like they edit it to the end of each episode where the characters that are already there, that's their name. But I don't see why they should do that. Like
That's
it's
an
giving
interesting
away
point.
details that you shouldn't know beforehand, in my opinion.
We would have to look into it once if ever
Yeah.
there was a character where they gave him a different name or they hid their identity until later, or is it
Yeah.
something that like you said, maybe because in their contract it's written this person is
Plays
performing
this character.
as this character, so legally they have to put it there. Which
Yeah.
but then at the same time,
And maybe they just
it
yeah, sorry.
depends how it works, but like there's always that thing where people are not mentioned in the credits, or
Yeah.
like they have different names in the credits. Like that definitely I've seen where they just gave them a different name to hide their identity.
Right.
But
Or they'll
yeah,
put it in like quotation marks where it's like, oh, we don't want to tell you who this person is, or even like give like. But yeah, well, that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on as we go into further episodes, where we'll see how they handle all this, and then we can come back and actually ask ourselves the question whether it was a spoiler, whether it was just like an extra little nugget that they just threw on, where it's like it doesn't really matter. So here you go,
yeah.
and
Like
fans
how
can
much
think
does
whatever
it
they want to
matter
think.
who he
Right.
is?
Right. That yeah. Right.
But like even if you
But
find out, is it going to be a big reveal, or it's kind of just here's more
right.
information?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I hope it's more of like here's just some more information, only based on the fact that if it's going to be a big reveal, then you definitely shouldn't do that, or like you gotta have a word with like Hotstar app where they remove it off a subtitle and shit.
But at the same time, I think the credits would have come from the Disney Plus version.
No, but also I noticed it first in the subtitles.
Yes, but well, not full. Did they use his last name in the subtitles? I think
No.
it was just his first name.
It was just the first name, but
Yeah.
last name was in
And
the
same way, I
subtitles.
think that's also so far it seems like they were the same on Disney Plus as well.
Right. But we'll
But
see. We'll see.
we'll see.
It's interesting that he picked that name, and there was no mention as to why he picked it in the whole episode.
Yeah.
They just call him Clem now. So I'm gonna maybe in my notes I think I went back and forth. I'll probably call him Cass for the most part, but I might call him Clem from time to time. just in
Class.
case. Right? I love the word Cass, and I came up with some things
Call him Klaus.
which will be
Klaus.
no. So that comes later. Yeah, that comes later. I'll tell you two, three things that I came up with. and so yeah, and Luthen gives him like a personal artifact, which is like he has this around his neck, which is like a little stone, and he says, "Here's the down payment," and he gives him like some story where we celebrate this, and it means more to me than it actually is, and if you sell it, like you can sell it for like 50 grand or something like that.
And he said it's a kyber crystal, right?
So yeah, so I wanted to ask you, like I don't remember the actual words,
As
but
far as I remember, it was a kyber crystal from a specific tribe.
right.
But if like I didn't fully get, was it like like a specific type of kyber crystal, or is it the same one that they use for lightsabers and the Death Star and everything?
Oh, it's a Kuati signet, blue kyber skystone.
Skystone. Okay, so it's not a kyber crystal; it's a kyber skystone.
It's blue kyber skystone. The ancient world.
But yeah,
I don't know what that is.
it's as far as I know, it's an ancient tribe in the Star Wars universe that was mentioned in one of the extended lores, and I think maybe the Clone Wars series. But what I really like about the scene, like I was mentioning before, it's Luthen convincing Cass that what he's saying is real, that like you can trust me. He tells them that like don't get less than this much, just know it will always mean more to me. It's always worth much more than that to me. So and he
I,
emphasizes, I want it back.
I want it
That,
back. I wanted to
yep,
mention that too. Yeah.
yeah.
First Cass is like, come on, man, you're just gonna give me 50 grand, and he's like, I want you to give that back to me, and he's like, oh, if I survive, Cass is trying to be like all smart ass, and Luthen's like, no, man, I want it back, and it was obviously like metaphorically, it obviously meant like showed like where he's trying to instill confidence in Cass and trying to show him that I have faith in you, that you can do this, and like you said, he's also trying to convince himself and us that, oh yeah, just trust me, like this will work out, don't worry about it. And I think he has his own self-doubts that most likely I think from within he kind of maybe feels bad for putting Cass in the situation and just wanted to
I mean,
do something.
he understands that like he ripped them out of his world and into
Right.
this crazy situation.
Right.
And Cass started earlier was saying that like, how can I even trust you? I don't know who you are. What is this?
Yeah.
What's going on? So
He
he's just
mentions maybe you're the Imperial spy.
exactly. So he's like, look, okay, I totally get where you're coming from. I'm just as paranoid as you. Just take this as a token. But what I like about it is it has you as an audience member being like, okay, he seems pretty serious about this. So maybe we can trust him. Maybe like maybe he is the good guy. But the way that he plays it and the sternness and energy
Mm.
that comes from Stellan Skarsgård, it's the whole time it's just I don't know. It keeps you wondering. It's like you kind of want to think that like he's just part of the rebellion, early rebellion, and he's fighting for the good. But at the same time, I keep wondering where when then later you see him in the later scene, I'm back to being like, oh shit. So can we trust him with what he said? And then in a couple of scenes later, we're back to being like, oh, it seems like we can trust him, and it keeps going back and forth. Where I'm still sitting here and I don't know if he could be just playing everybody. Oh, he's just a good guy, which wouldn't be as interesting, but it's still really fun to watch currently.
Yeah. I think he's carried the show so far. Like everyone's good, everything's great, but I think he's like the thing that's holding all this together with like
It
the way he's acted and the way his character is shown so far. Where it's like he just seemed like just a straight guy who would come buy something and maybe get him out of this jam or something. But like the way his character has gone through this whole episode, it's like the way he's acted, it's been so amazing, and like you're so, like you said, you're so interested in him, where it's like you have no idea where his character is going to go from here.
totally
And even if it's
elevates.
even if it's the most predictable thing, it's still going to be interesting to watch him portray that kind of a thing and see where he goes with it.
Because of how he's portraying it. And
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's totally elevating the entire show. Every time
Yeah.
he comes on, it makes the other actors where
Yeah.
they're not as big and famous, makes
Yeah.
them feel like more important and better. Where there's some people that will come up later where at first I was like, you guys don't even look like like you should be here. But then the
Right.
second like the scenes go on, I'm totally in it. I'm like, yo, everyone's
Yeah.
killing it right now.
Right.
I just
I
got the
agree.
other Matrix reference. Okay,
Oh, you did?
I think so. Let's see. I just thought of another
We'll,
one.
okay. We'll get to it. You mentioned when yours comes, and maybe we'll just, or maybe we might end up doing it together. We'll see. Yeah. And then so they land the spaceship, and Luthen goes out. He's like, you see someone coming down the thing, and he's like, oh, that's the person in charge, and she's gonna disagree with me. She's gonna fight with me, and blah blah blah. And but wait here until I go sort this out. So he goes, and we meet our new character named Vel, who's this blonde woman, I think. She seemed blonde. She's not as blonde as Mira in the bureau, but I think she's blonde. But either way, not important. But he springs upon her that, oh, I've got this new person named Cass, and Lucen describes his skills as a pilot, and says, and one thing he mentions that he's a very good thief, and he's not afraid to kill someone. Where all those things about Rogue One and all this stuff are questions about like, oh, like he just did those cops, and you're just like, dude, he didn't even look like he felt bad or anything about it. So I'm
Also,
glad that that's a character trait that's actually important in this.
that's probably how Luthen found him ways, like someone killed
Right.
a cop, cold blooded.
Right. I agree. And obviously Vel is like disagreeing with him and saying like, hey, how can you spring this upon me right now, and blah blah blah. And then suddenly when Luthen is telling her something, she like looks down and Luthen just shouts at her, because throughout this whole thing you're sort of thinking like, oh, who, like, she's the leader and we get it, like Luthen sort of like, and then Luthen just immediately shouts at her, look at me, you wanted to be a leader, didn't you? And it's like, whoa. So you're like, okay, and you immediately think like, okay, maybe this is Luthen's daughter, maybe, and he's,
Oh,
or
really?
maybe someone he's like, that's what
Could
that's the
be.
first thing I thought of.
That's fucked up, but could be.
Yeah, but like, and the way, or maybe it's just some girl he's been grooming. Like, I mean, I didn't mean it like from that point of view, but like to be someone like it's someone that he has a personal connection to. Like that's what
Yeah.
I got immediately.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. It could
Right?
totally be. It'd be interesting because I had like a different thought about that group that we'll discuss later. But yeah,
Mm,
that's it.
okay,
That would make that, yeah,
right.
very very
The way
interesting.
he's,
Same like what we were discussing with Andor's father, where like, yeah,
yeah,
that it's an
yeah,
interesting, if they're going there again, very
yeah.
mature theme.
Where it's like I mean, if Luthen's been doing this for so long, I'm sure his daughter must have grown up within in all this, and like just like been a part of this, and now she's like, I want to be the leader, and Luthen's like, okay, and he clearly seems like a strict, like, it is really risky stuff, and
That's what
but yeah,
it's so actually we can mention it even now that like it's a very strict father if you're sending your daughter on a suicide mission.
right, exactly, as the leader.
Yeah.
So who knows, and but yeah,
But it seems
so,
like this mission is very, very, very important to Luthen. Like
yes,
he really needs this to happen. Like it's becoming very clear that like
yeah,
that's why he got Cassian, because it's like he knew they needed another. At this
yeah,
point, it feels like they really just needed another guy.
yeah,
I hasn't really felt yet that like they needed him specifically.
right.
It's yes, like he can fly the thing, but like yeah, that it's still
Yeah.
so short notice and stuff.
I think they just needed like a pilot who he could buy, and like who would be okay with doing, and he also mentions it, that he's a mercenary, and she's like, how could you do this, and he says, well, that's the good thing about having a mercenary, he's disposable. So you're like, oh, like all this stuff he just told Cassian about, like, I want this back, and he's putting all this like faith and confidence in him. All of a sudden he's like, yo, he's disposable, don't worry about it. And he also gives Vel, he's like, you have two options, either take him on or call the whole thing off.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, yeah, the
And
disposable part was also very interesting again, where it's
yeah,
it's the flip flop,
yeah, he just had
crisscross.
a scene, this emotional scene
Yeah,
of like where we discussed like he's putting his faith in them, and he's like, no, I want
he's
it back, it
like
means so much.
just kill
Like,
him.
is this what we do? So and we're like, who was he really lying to? I'm pretty sure he was lying to Vel
Yeah,
about, like, yeah, like I think he seemed genuine when he was talking to Cass, and then
well,
he's trying to just give like reasons to Vel, where it's like, oh, don't worry, where I mean you would have to have that kind of a thing about you, where you're able to make those executive decisions, and maybe that goes into his character of like raising his daughter into something like this, if that comes to
my
fruition.
thought was actually that like maybe that Kyber Starstone is not real because Cass has no idea what it is.
Oh.
But yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it.
Okay. Yeah. But maybe it could be funny if that happens. You would see like he risked his life, but obviously he's like, I want it back, and then because he's only getting 50,000 out of the 200,000. So even if it is real, and like I personally think it's just,
Yeah.
this is my prediction of that scene, is that at some point Luthen might sacrifice himself, and Cassian won't be able to get his 200 grand from Luthen, but he's gonna still hold on to the stone with him, for until, I don't know if it's referenced in Rogue One, but he's still gonna hold on to it as like a thing. He's not gonna sell it for 50 grand. I think that's gonna be the thing that metaphorical connection bond between them. You know.
I guess me personally, I just want Luthen to just like completely crisscross applesauce
Yeah,
all
who
the
knows?
way.
That
Where
would
at
be
the end
awesome.
he's just like he's just the worst out of all of them.
Right.
Where it
That would
turns
be
out
cool.
that like him showing up on that planet was like the worst thing Cassian could have ever happened to him. Like he's going to die in Rogue One because well that is already a given because
Yeah.
Luthen picked him up over there. He's going to die in Rogue One, but you know what is if it's like not for a good cause? I don't know.
Right. Well, that goes into the theme of like what I said about self-sacrifice for the greater good, or versus Cassian's self-interest, where he just says, "Just drop me off, and I'm going to keep running. I'm not going to get into all this nonsense. I just want to survive, and I just want to get on to my next thing until they find me for stealing something small, and then they'll hang me." You know, and that's his thing. But it would be funny where he gets into all this like motivational stuff by Luther, and like, no, you gotta do your sacrifice for the greater good. And he does a sacrifice, but it's not for the, I mean, his actual sacrifice in Rogue One is for the greater good in some sense. But what
Yeah.
if you're right? Like, what if he gets into this mission? He kind of survives. He does survive it, we know. But but I, and also actually, you know, now that I think about it, I've been so caught up in the show that I didn't think about it. But now that I've said it out loud, we do know that Cass is going to survive all of this. So is all the tension just deflated?
No, because I wanted to wait till we get to the next crew, but I totally thought that was the Dirty Dozen that's not going to make it. We're going to see a big body count going forward, where like we're getting introduced to these characters for us to see them get off the way that we saw in Rogue One. No one survived. I feel like that theme is going to come into the show because these characters, that was the thing that I felt off about them. Where like they don't feel like they're cast members that's supposed to be here for like 2-3 seasons,
Right.
but at the
Right.
same time they're so interesting immediately the way that they're written and
Yeah.
the scenarios that they're putting them in, that like you're already kind of caring for them in a way where like you're in like you're invested in them, so that like
Right.
if they start like it. So just we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I really like the fact that it's like I was mentioning earlier, it is by the end becoming a heist show. Where like there's that espionage, that thriller. But in the end, it was just my favorite thing in heist movies where they set up the heist in terms
The
of like this
plan.
is exactly the planning of like this is what we're
Right.
going to do.
Right.
And I'm so curious, there's always like different ways they can do it where
Right.
that is the setup and this is how it goes, and we just see
Right.
like bam bam bam, this is how we discussed it. Or
Right.
now that we know how it's supposed to go, what all is going to go wrong, how many things of the things that have to go right are not going
Right.
to go right, and who is going to pay for that. And
Right.
that's why I was so hyped by the end of the episode, where I was just like, I'm really ready for episode 5. Or I think
Right.
they might make us wait till 6, but yeah, that whole all of that. But that made me think that I think the tension will be not is Cass going to survive. It's more about they're making us care for characters to then take them away from us, I assume.
And also I guess piggybacking on that point, right?
Yeah.
I got confused for a second. Like how many people does Cass affect like by coming into like direct contact with them? We've seen what happens to characters on Marlana or Morlana, and now we're seeing him being injected into this new environment where now what's going to happen to these people because of a consequence of having Cass there, right? Because that could also be it. Like obviously we know Cass is going to survive, but what's going to happen to these, and what would have happened had they not gone with Cass or somebody else, like someone of a different kind of a character who's
Very
a
true.
pilot thief but like a different type of a person. And we know, because we know what Cass does.
Yeah, and
So
he,
we'll
he totally
see.
still
Yeah,
gave up some shady vibes throughout the entire episode.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
he wasn't like we'll get to it, but I thought the dynamic
Yeah,
was really cool
yeah.
while
We'll
they
get
like
to it.
brought him in there.
Right. So we'll get so Luthen just tells Vel, no, you have to accept him. He brings Cass out, and then they Vel meet Cass, meet Clem, right? And then we get on to the next scene which is a very cool scene. One of my favorites, one of my small favorites, where you see Blevin, the black Imperial officer, reprimanding Mosk, Karn, and the Fat Chief from the beginning. And it's the funniest. It's so amazing seeing these people in their own environments, and then drop like the Fat Chief officer in his office. I was like, oh, okay, he's gonna be the big boss man, right? Like of
He
the
looked like a
police
fat
guy.
cat.
Right. And then you saw Cyril Karn as this soldier guy, like this super, like I'm a super cold hard soldier. And here we are in episode 4, and the black the Blevin is reprimanding them, and fat officer goes, well, I didn't even have anything to do with it. And he's
I was
like,
standing there.
and it's like that's the problem. And he's yeah, it's all posture and the way he's talking. It seems so real. And even Mosk, he seems like, okay, now I totally get you. You're gonna act like this when you're in your zone, but when you're in the real zone, you just come across as just like some overweight security guard trying to act like a soldier.
I love the hand up. And
That's so I wanted to ask you.
Really?
Really?
You serious?
Oh my god! So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk,
And-
like mention about the humor. How it's like it doesn't feel forced, even though such like dark and heavy stuff is going on. So,
And yeah, it wasn't even like it didn't feel out of place at all. It still
yeah,
felt
exactly.
in world. And you could, I also noticed you could see Karn. You could actually see that his uniform was actually altered compared to the other ones. There's much more flair on it and stuff.
Right.
And I don't know, you probably didn't write down the line, but I loved what Blevin was said at the very end, where it's like it took your incompetence and
Yes.
what this and that to make this happen. It was really good.
Let me just
Yeah, great written
and
performance.
I totally agree. One thing I wanted to just make a quick notice was that right before we get into that scene, like in that scene, the first shot is like of guards through the window, and they've got like Darth Vader helmets on from the back, like similar to that. I don't know if you noticed that they're all wearing black.
Isn't this also where we see a quick shot of somebody just like taking trash and putting it into a garbage can, and you see the Chinese takeout again?
No. I think I'm
At
just
some
looking
point,
to
there's
the-
like a quick shot of that where it's just like, yeah,
I don't remember that.
somebody's job in this thing is literally just to like take people's trash. Like that dude was eating those noodles, he just left them there for home income.
The janitor.
Yeah,
The janitor.
we've heard about the trash compactors. Now we know there's janitors too.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. But so here he is, and he says it took the combined ingredients of idiocy, ineptitude, and total disengagement for this farce to have reached the full apex of incredulous disaster.
What a line! Like,
And right then, Moss goes like this, and he says, "Seriously."
like chef's kiss. That's such
Yes. Yes.
whoever wrote that, you get
Yeah.
a pat on the back. You
Right.
went home that day and you felt great.
Exactly.
And the way he says it too, it was great performance.
And then he comes to, so this scene is going on where he's reprimanding them. It looks real. And there's a small little funny scene with Moss going like this. And then Blevin comes to Karn. And he says, and it just, the tone just shifts immediately from that humor to just suddenly like, he goes, proud, are we? And remember, I kept mentioning Karn's face in like whenever he's got this smug look.
Yeah.
The word I kept looking for was, he kept looking proud. Like he has this entitled pride about himself. And now it's like all of that has been like shattered. And he's in this office next to a real Imperial guard, a real Imperial officer. And he's now, it's almost like he's being called out the way like Cass was called out by Luthen in the spaceship about, he's like, I was fighting here and there, and he's like, no, you were a cook. Don't even try to act cool with me because I'm way cooler than you and you've never been cool,
Yeah.
And Cass sort of takes that easily, but it's amazing how the music comes in for Karn at this moment. Yeah, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, sorry. I was just making sure we're still recording.
Oh yeah. But yeah, and okay. My bad. And it's these moments where it just made me like start falling so much more in love with Karn as a whole, where it amazes me how much I disliked him right in the beginning, and now it's like his acting is like he's acted. But yeah, we'll get more into that. And he also Blevin also says that because of this, the entire Morlana system is under permanent imperial authority.
Yeah, which
So
also again interesting. I still want to know more about these corpos, the blues.
right,
Like who are they? What is their exact purpose? Like
right.
yeah,
I think they're just lower level officers where they're more like like they handle like the field work sort of thing, where they're on like patrol for these like small districts, and then these imperial officers like Blevin and the white collars, they're their bosses.
Yeah.
And they sort of handle like a bunch of sectors. Like so, we're told later on that Blevin looks over 6 sectors. So I'm guessing Morlana is one sector, one of those sectors, and the blues are the guys who monitor the stuff on the sector.
But then, what was the point of him saying that it's in full imperial control? It made it seem like the Imperials took away the control from the Blues.
What do you mean? Like, why did they do that, or what does that mean?
What does that imply? Like in terms of their
Oh, right.
relation?
Oh, right. So I'm guessing. So I'm guessing that it's going to be the black helmet dudes who are going to be there, or maybe stormtroopers. But I think stormtroopers might be there for Darth Vader. I think it's going to be the black helmet guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think there's more to learn about the hierarchy and how everything works.
Right.
But
I think it's kind of cool that you're being introduced to all this, like, and it's actually interesting.
Exactly.
And we're getting to know, and we're speculating, and like actually coming. Like I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about in the prequels, other than the last couple of things where it's like the characters were interacting with each other. But throughout the thing, whenever they were talking about democracy and all that, I was like, dude, like I understand democracy, but I have no idea what any of this has to do with anything. And it became too
at the same
boring.
time, so much character development again, where we learn so much about all three of them. And again,
yes,
I totally agree with Karn acting so much just with his facial expressions, where he had one line in this whole episode, but he had a big impact. I feel like
amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna get way more into that. So stay tuned for that when his next scene comes up. And so yeah, so now we come back to Cass and Vel, where they're hiking back to the base, and Vel is explaining to Cass that we're gonna mention to everyone that you were always part of the plan, and it was up to me to tell. Like, we're not gonna say that we're dropping you in now, and Cass is sort of asking about Luthen, and she's like, we're not going to speak of Luthen. This is the plan, and you have to like stay focused, blah blah blah. And then that's when Cass gets to know that they're not just stealing a payroll, that they're going to be stealing an entire armory. And he's like, yeah,
going up against the garrison.
Going up against the garrison.
That's the one that really threw him.
Right. And then suddenly we see a very cool thing where they hear a sound, and suddenly they get into hiding, and it's two TIE fighters.
I liked also the little moment of him being like, he didn't say anything about that, and she's like, I don't know who you're talking about. And
right.
he's like,
exactly.
You're going up against the garrison, like, and he's like, so do you want to join the others or not? And it's like, how many of you are there? And they're like, with you now 7. Like he's like, you need a freaking army for this. Like, how many hundreds of men do you have? And she's like, 7.
7, including you.
I like that moment.
Right. Yeah, like that's the thing, man. Like you're right. All these little moments between characters, like it kept me on board, you know, and it kept me, like you said, like no action, but I didn't even really think about that. I think it's maybe because like subconsciously my brain was just like eating up all this cool character moments.
I mean, immediately it's an interesting dynamic where like it is not okay. We have this mission. Here's a new guy. We're gonna fill you in. No, it's Luthen being like, look, I'm gonna take you. I'm gonna force you onto this person that really doesn't want you there, and she has to take you. But nobody there is going to be happy about it, and if she like could, she would probably rather just shoot you in the face than have to deal with this right now.
Right.
But because their connection with Luthen or whatever, she's just like, okay, so without you, it's not going to happen. So let's just go. And
Yeah.
she's like, do you have like save your questions? It's a long walk,
Yeah. Save your win.
Yeah, I like the dynamic gets like stranger and stranger in that way, like in the sense of like he feels so like it's so like he shouldn't be there, and
Right.
I love that dynamic. I feel like I haven't. It's not a very common trope of the way that he's getting in there, but yeah, I like that.
That's one of the themes I actually wanted to mention, and that we'll talk about more and more later on. Is our main characters, well, main and side characters, feeling out of their element and being in like a place which is foreign and quote unquote alien to them because we're in Star Wars. And even people like Vel, because the way Luthen screams at her about, hey, you wanted to lead, now you have to lead. Like, and Karn realizing that he was in something for more than he could like actually handle. And now we also see maybe Dedra, who's in the bureau, but she also seems like, so these four main characters in all these different areas, they all seem like they're out of their element in a position where they may have bargained more than they can chew. I think that's the phrase, right? And now they just
Bit
sort
of
of have
more.
to put up a bit of more than they can chew as a bargain. And now they don't know really how to like they're really just going off of more of like bravado and like just like self convincing of like, oh no, I can do this, I can do this, and I just have to put up a brave front, and I just have to go along with this facade and like this delusion of I can actually do this. Where Vel is like, I can actually lead these people, but now she's being thrown all these curveballs of Clem and another thing was like, you're right, like there wasn't a scene where normally in a regular TV show it would just be like you would just have a scene where Luthen introduces Clem to Vel, and Vel is like, "Oh, we're lucky to have you on board, and I'm so glad you're here." And Luthen and Clem would be like, "Thank you," and they sit down, and she explains to him, "This is how many people we have." But it's like the scene is moving along; they're talking to each other. Cass is finding out more information, more and more information as we're finding out, and then we're finding out more stuff about Vel and how many people there are. It's not like a stagnant scene where it's just like two people just relaying expository lines to each other.
And the
And
whole
yeah,
time she's yelling also.
exactly.
Because you,
Yeah.
you feel like it's windy, it's out and about,
Yeah.
and she's just like, "We gotta get out of
Yeah.
here. You
And
have
it's
to
so
ask so
like,
many questions."
yeah, it's so like real where you can put yourself in a situation like that where suddenly like your boss puts you with like someone. You're like, what? I gotta deal with this as well now? Like, come on, man. And you're just like annoyed, and the new person's just trying to ask like relative questions, but you're just annoyed in general. And you're like, just stop asking questions, just do as I say, just don't like talk to me anymore. And like, and it's good to put these characters in these conflicting situations because it arises more like a lot of drama comes from that. And like I said, like it's not going to feel stale and boring where it just scenes just go along and characters just sort of move along at like a stale pace.
Yeah.
So yeah, and now and then we suddenly they hide and we see two TIE fighters go by. I thought it looked really cool, like seeing those two things in an environment like this with the sound that comes, like it looked really cool, and how scared they both were, where they had to
It
just like hide from it.
it reminded me of World War II or World War I fighters again, when you're like
Right,
on the beach or something in a war
right.
movie, and you hear like from the
Mm.
distance coming, and then suddenly it's very loud over them. Very cool.
The sound was really cool. I made a note of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
totally. All right, so now we get to Dedra. She's in her office and she's got her device with her assistant, and she locates the Starpath unit because that's what they were sort of talking about in the morning meeting where the chief was asking Blevin like what happened in Marlana and stuff like that. And she finds it and she sends her assistant to go ask Blevin for some kind of access because she's like, oh, this is in our jurisdiction as well, and we could get it. And we're like, okay, what is she up to now? Like, is she just trying to find this? Like, what is she trying to do? And then we get a really like, I think like a 10-second scene, but it's like maybe one of the best scenes where it's just no dialogue and we see Luthen just put his spaceship on autopilot and walk into this place, and he's going through his like wigs, and he puts on this wig, and you see him get into
Before that,
character.
I even like the little mirror thing where like
Yeah,
his entire like setup is just like ready. Where again, is it like a special modification he made to the ship,
right,
and like he has to like flip the mirror around so that it actually works. It's not like just ready
right,
coming out. I like these little details again, and
right.
all the tech. Even later on, when they use the Star Wars iPad, it's so chunky, and like all the
Yes.
tech in this is so like I love it. I love the look of it. And yes,
And
then the transformation is amazing. Where
yeah,
like he's using his hands to get into character,
it
and then the
is.
smile,
Oh my god. And you're
so
like,
good.
whoa, what's going on now? Because we just saw him be so stern and like this cool kind of guy who like was in this action scene, in Morlana with Cassie, and then he's like shouting it, and he's having this cool banter with him. And then suddenly he puts on this like long wig,
A
and
lot of
he gets
rings,
into like this like sort of, yeah, he puts on a lot of rings, and he gets into like sort of flamboyant type of a character. And the scene is just like from far away, where just seeing him in
beautiful
this
shot.
dark little corner, it's
It's the
amazing.
it's almost
Yeah,
like the
the
from the
Joker.
exactly.
Yes,
It's
there you go.
a little bit of that, and then I
Yeah,
like that also. Once he finds it, he just
yeah.
drops it, and he
He
just
drops it
walks.
and he comes back, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh, like
sick.
Skarsgård, man, so great.
He's
It's like a
bringing it.
10-6. Yeah, he's
He's
yeah. I'm
owning
so
it.
I'm so pumped by it.
Yeah, same. So good.
And it's not in like a campy way. That's what I love. Like where he's
Yeah,
not like, people say like a lot of these big actors, they come in these things, like fantasy things or like comic book things, and they're like chewing the scenery by being over the top campy. He's just like acting his ass off where you're just like, man, I love seeing you just like be on screen.
if you think about it, every single scene we've gotten with him makes you want to know more. When he first shows up on the
Exactly.
ship, when he
Right.
walks into the workshop, to him finally talking to Cass, to now the beginning of this on the ship, where every time he's like we're learning, he's like a new person almost. Well,
Right.
not at the beginning a full new person. There we're still like figuring out, but like now since we're really getting to know him, there's a new layer every time there's a new
Yeah.
conversation. There's some new layer to him where you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, that adds so much to what's already going on, and it just has you intrigued to like, because it's not it's not just giving you answers of like he's this, he's done that because of this. It's something's happening, and you're just like, who is he? What's going on? You know?
Yeah, I agree. He's so layered, and every new scene with him, that's another thing I wanted to mention of this episode. And I think I didn't really see that I didn't really notice it in the previous ones, where it's like this all the scenes are structured like so perfectly, where it's like every scene has like a beginning, middle, and end, and it's like every scene has a purpose and a goal, where the story progresses, and there's like the character becomes a little more fleshed out and a little more fleshed out, and it keeps you more and more interested, where the more you see them, you discover more things about them. It's not like the same character just in a different scene, where it's like not just the story is also moving along, the plot is moving along, but also we're like the character is becoming deeper and deeper, and we're like, wow, like, what's gonna happen next? What is he gonna do next?
Yeah, it's what we were
Yeah,
saying in episode 2, where it feels like every scene has a purpose. Like even if
right,
it's slow, even if
exactly,
it's just people talking, it
right,
is evolving characters. It is
yeah,
moving the story into new directions. It
right.
keeps it interesting because
Yeah,
it's not just
yeah.
them talking about
It's
random
it's not
things.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
not meandering into random places and just going off of tangents,
yeah,
and the audience is like, well, what did we really need to waste our time with that?
yeah.
It's
It's
always like either world building, moving the story along, or fleshing out a character, or in some scenes doing all three at once, which is amazing.
yeah, incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, so that was just like a tiny little scene, and he, like you said, like he finds his groove, he drops it, and he just walks back into the cockpit, which is where we're seeing the shot from. And yeah, a lot of those Joker type shots, which will come later, which was my favorite montage of this whole thing. That got me. I was like, man, all right, we'll get into that. So next scene, we're at Vel and Cass, and she's sort of explaining to him what Aldani is and who the Aldanis were, and that they were here for centuries, and the Empire just came through and drove them away to a different place for within a decade. And she explains that it's the perfect hub for distribution if you're trying to take over the galaxy. So that's why it's sort of like an important location.
Another great night.
Yeah, exactly. And Cass sort of asks, like, so who are we supposed to be, like, in this area? Like, she's like, there's still shepherds and or nature lovers.
Yeah.
Right? I did it.
Damn,
I finally. No, but did you hear my finally referencing shepherds and or nature lovers?
What is that referencing?
And or.
Oh, and or. Oh. Did they say that in the show?
Yeah, no, I made a note of it. I was like, okay, I have to make sure I'm able to reuse that somewhere.
Okay.
But yeah, and it was like, yeah, those damn hippies, they're the only ones who would be hanging out. That was my second point. Yeah. Yeah.
Just doing some shrooms, bro. Like Imperial's kind of like, what are you doing? It's like, yo, bro, just doing some shrooms with some goats, bro.
I got my sheep here and some goats. They're bleating. I noticed that in the subtitles. So they are goats. I think goats bleat.
Wait.
They're not like some
is that their name
alien.
or that's what they're doing?
No, the goats bleat. That like when they go back, like that's bleating.
That's called bleating?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard.
Yeah, goats bleat.
Learn something every day.
They don't just go back. that's not a scientific term.
So what does the cow do?
Goes moo.
Well, so
no, I don't know. It probably does something like that. There's probably
mooting.
But yeah, goats bleat. It's either goats or sheep. I'm not sure, but I think it's goats.
Okay.
But yeah, and mystics, and so yeah, and now we get to Dedra entering Blevin's office, and they have a small little conflict about Blevin denying her request to give her access to this, and we have some more character development of Blevin saying like, how long have you been here? Just a year? I would warn you from trying to climb up the corporate ladder too quick. And I was like, this all really seems very cliche, but it's cool. Like I'm glad we're understanding the character. We're understanding these weird named people, but like from a point of view where I can, like, even someone like me can understand who they are within this universe. So I guess it's that perfect balance of being too simple and too human, relatable, and just having names like Bix and having like random alien shit.
Again, it's the juxtaposition of the environment and the look of everything, with it being so mundane in the way that they're talking about everything. And I think that's what's making it so interesting, that right. cocktail.
Right. Exactly. And he mentions, he's like, hey, you fall here, you fall alone. And it's like, and that's a good little insight into how people are even within this environment. It is very cold and very corporate, like where everyone is in it for themselves. And I will compare that later on when we meet the other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a little 1% kind of, mentality.
Yeah. Every single employee is in it for himself. They're not a team, but they have to work as a team. But everyone's trying to, like, replace someone or like get someone, like move into someone else's office and get them out, and very cutthroat. And and there we go. And then we see Clem and Vel hiking at night, and we see the two moons.
I didn't.
Or the two suns. The two suns. I don't know which of the two it is. You didn't see that?
Well, if it's night, wouldn't it be moons?
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe it was the sun's setting, because isn't that what Luke was looking at. It was the two suns setting, but it looked like
Yeah.
two moons because they look white. So maybe
Mm.
they have two moons as well.
Yeah. Again, I didn't even notice. That's a cool detail.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. And because they have the second moon in the little back, and they have like it covered, most of it is covered with clouds.
Okay.
So it wasn't like out like, so that's one more thing where it's like the member berries that we talked about between this compared to Rogue One, where Rogue One is like every time there was a member berry in it, it was like, hey, look, remember this, remember this. And in this,
Sure.
it's like, it's just there because that's the universe you're in.
Yeah.
These things are going to be there, but they've made sure to make it a point where even when they show it, it's like it's in the background and you may not even notice it. And maybe if you look around, you're like, oh, look, there's the two moons. And it's not like, hey, look, there's two moons. Remember that? Remember when Luke was looking at those two suns? We know Star Wars, guys. Come on. We're fans and we know we love fans. And it wasn't like in your face, like just gross and obnoxious fan service, where it's just like, it wasn't even fan service. It was just there because this is the universe that they're in and they're just paying attention to their details.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so they're hiking back to the place, and now we start getting introduced slowly to the new members of the rebellion, starting with two white guys, two British white guys, and they notice that what's her name? Vel is coming back, and it's Cassian and Juan. Do you get that joke?
Again, nice character moment with the gun going
Right.
and bang,
Yeah,
you're dead.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
got
yeah.
murdered in their sleep, and like
Yeah.
you're going.
It's like, oh
he's
my
like,
God.
don't tell her, and he's like, you're going to tell her, and you figure out
Yeah.
quick because I think she's coming.
Right.
Nice.
I
And
agree.
I liked also Cassian with the poncho gave a lot of like
Yeah.
Western vibes of who's the
Mm.
stranger coming into that town.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And then we're now one by one. Obviously, everyone, we start seeing all the other rebels of the alliance, and you can see that everyone's they start asking each other, hey, do you know who she's with? Do you know who she's with? And they're like, no, I thought you would
know.
I thought you would know. And everyone starts popping on the thing and see Vel coming in, and she starts introducing everyone to Cass. And this is where we get to our amazing.
Before we
you
get
want
to
you want
that,
to say something? Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Did you notice that they had basically what looked like AK-47s?
Yes. No, I didn't notice that, but I noticed that they had like machine guns, like with
Yeah,
like,
like some sort like it didn't look like a laser gun. It looked like they
Yeah.
had a bullet magazine on it.
Yeah.
And have you seen that in Star Wars before? I think it's always
I
been
don't
laser
think so.
guns,
Oh yeah, that's true actually.
right?
I didn't notice that.
Like
Yeah.
it stuck out to me because it happened in Halo in the TV show as well, where for some reason everybody was using actual AK-47s. You know, like this is that is different because it's thousands of years in the future of humanity, and like why would they still use the same guns? But here, I guess it's not that, but it's still interesting to just see. Is that a laser magazine, or is he going to shoot actual bullets at people? I don't know. It looks cool. I totally get it. It looks cool, but it's stuck at. Well, see, there is magazines on blasters.
Yeah.
You know, like there is the stormtrooper blasters have magazines. Even I mean the Han Solo's blaster. I don't think we ever seen him use a magazine, but it's like a World War II gun or World War One pistol turned into a blaster. But this one just straight up looked very much like a assault rifle more than before. I don't know. Maybe it's literally just that the shape of it. It probably is just a blaster. But yeah.
They look exactly like, I have the scene here, and they look exactly like assault rifles.
Yeah.
And the color, the look, the design, and my guess is that they're just trying to tell us that this is the lower class weapon, like where these rebels would, because the moment I saw those, I actually didn't even make that observation that you did. My thing was just like, it just looked like a regular like rebel alliance that you would see like in like, you know, like in like in a time base right now, or like in earlier World War type movies.
I just usually
Where
like they usually take guns that exist in our world, but like update
right,
them a bit. And
yeah,
just this time, it just didn't feel like they updated them
yeah,
that much.
mm,
So I
right,
hope they use them later because I'd be interesting to see what
yeah.
those
That would
were.
be cool to see. Yeah, you're right. I think they would if they shoot out lasers, looking at the way they look and the nozzles and everything. It would. I think the lasers will look really weird. I think it would
That's
look
what
really
I
out of
was
place.
I
Yeah,
was thinking that too. But I'm trying to think right
right.
now, if you really look at a blaster from like a stormtrooper,
Mm,
it is like it looks kind of like a rifle, but
right.
they still did enough where
Mm,
like it has the features of a rifle, but it looks
right.
futuristic in that one
Right.
sense. Where this looked very old school, but it
Mm,
doesn't even look like an assault rifle we would use now. It looks like an
right.
assault rifle from like a while back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Well, we'll see if they use it. I hope they use it.
yeah, me too.
Oh, yeah. But so now Vel starts introducing Cass to all our very diverse group of rebels, very racially diverse, and I'm guessing they're very racist against Far East Asian people because that's the only race that wasn't represented in this entire Rebel Alliance. I was
I
amazed at how at how like okay, so I have a question here, okay, where it's like first of all this is the facade that everyone wants to show where it's like forced diversity, and it just looks so on the nose, where you have an Indian woman, a brown skinned woman, you have a black person, you have two white people, a white lady, and now a Hispanic man. And it's like really the seven people that are fighting this mission, you were able to find each person, and each of them has like a specific thing that they do,
but
and they all just and
well,
but on the other side it's
they
like
have
what
two
else?
black people and two girls.
Well, the second one, yeah.
Would it be better
Well,
if they were all white?
well, so that's my question. But that's what I was thinking. Obviously, the first thing when you see this, the first thing you notice is
Like,
how diverse they are. And my next question to myself was that, well, what would be better than that in today's day and age?
but also it- think about it this way: we're in space a long, long time ago, where people can
Right.
hop from planet to planet. Everybody shouldn't be looking the same,
No, no,
even
I
more
agree
than.
with that. Like it makes sense when there's like townspeople. It just stood out so much because there's like seven people and they all covered every single race except for the Far East Asian. That's the only they're able to cover. That's my
They
thing where they
realized
were
it was
able to
getting too
cover
much. They were like, okay,
exactly,
let's go with double
exactly.
black guy instead
Yeah,
of that.
double black or double. They have two white guys
Yeah, I guess
and a
that
white lady,
was for
and
the studio.
yeah.
How did you feel about the who looks like an Indian or Pakistani brown lady?
So again, I have no issues. I have absolutely no problems with
My,
anyone looking a certain way, but my point was it was just a funny observation where it's like there's seven people and this it kind of took me out of the story because like I could now see like this behind the studio where it's like, oh, we have to hire this
well,
person, we have to hire this person, and we have to
well,
throw them all in this one little group.
my thought there was more that I think I thought it was interesting to have that lady included, and I was trying to think back how many brown people have been in
Oh,
Star
right,
Wars,
from that point of view.
and I don't think I probably there have been other ones, but I think
Right,
prominently there was only Riz Ahmed in Rogue One who was
right,
really
yeah.
like representing
Well,
the
Salman was there in the first couple episodes,
well, yes, but
but he's not as brown looking.
like she straight up just looked like an Indian
Yes,
lady.
yes, Indian, yeah,
Uh, and
British Indian person.
I just can't remember if we had seen that before in Star Wars.
Right, right, right. Oh, yeah, that's true, actually.
So in that sense, I was like, it was nice, and they didn't make like a big thing out of her. She's just like, yeah, and that's
No, so that's the cool part where it's like they're just regular people. They have their names. It was just funny to me, like just
yeah,
seeing. I
I
was
get it.
because I was half expecting it to happen, where I'm like, because again, like I asked myself the question where it's like, what else are the studios supposed to do? Like, no matter what they do, if they don't do this, they'll get butchered for it. If they do it, then it's like, but so they might as well do it, right? Like, I'm glad to have all the representation, but I just
Honestly,
feel like if
if
it
it
was
doesn't hurt
sprinkled
the
throughout a
story,
little better.
If it doesn't hurt the story, I think it's okay because
I
give
agree
more
with you.
people work, more
Right.
like races and colors.
Right.
Like, why not? It's like if it doesn't need to be a certain race, then let
Right.
it be whoever is best for that role.
Yeah. But that's my point. Where this
Well,
seemed
maybe
like they
they were.
were
Maybe they
looking
were.
for.
What is
Maybe they
if
were.
they?
That's true.
Maybe they looked around and they're just like, turns out that like you guys are it. Where I say like I think the biggest thing that stood out to me to this group was that, like I said, they did not look like leads for a big Star Wars show. Where I don't know.
Right.
That's why I feel like maybe they're disposable, but at the same time, they have. I think they chose that specific look for you for the look of the show and the story. But again, their writing, the dynamic, the way that everything unfolds with these guys, you're immediately in.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. Another funny thing that I just wanted to point out that it also feels like the facade of forced diversity in real life, where you have this full group of diverse people that you're trying to portray as like virtue signaling, led by a white lady, but the strings are all being pulled by an old white man. And I thought that was, I was like, I know that's me like spreading it apart, but I thought that was funny that it's kind of like art imitates life, you know. But yeah, so anyways, off of that tangent, we're now introduced to our Rebel Alliance, and they're actually a really cool group of characters.
Well, is it
And
the Rebel Alliance or just like one Suicide Squad?
Ooh, well, it's kind of the same thing though, right?
I guess that was the thing that Luthen was saying, was like, are those all the same thing? And it was like, what
Right.
else are there? Whatever.
Yeah,
Cassian said.
and one, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that they both agree on it, but for different reasons. That was very interesting to me. Luthen says, aren't they the same things? Because he agrees they're the same things. Cass says, aren't they the same things? Because he agrees, but in his mind, it's like, dude, they're all Suicide Squads. And in his mind, they're Rebel Alliances fighting for the greater good, even though they have different names.
True.
So, yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I wrote it down, but I forgot to mention it. Yeah. And so now they're mentioned to, should I take their names? Should I introduce them?
If you want to.
Really quickly? Right?
Sure.
Okay.
Because I don't know even now if you'll do it if I remember them later. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. I'll try. Because it'll actually be kind of weird referring to them as white person, black person.
Yeah, I guess.
Right? So it'll be good for us to.
When you just refer to them as the guy, what he's doing.
Right, we could do that too. But it's still like I'm not fully sure exactly what their positions are. So it'll be cool. So okay, so she introduces them like, hey, this is Clem. He's always been part of the plan, and they're like, oh no, blah blah blah. They're disputing, and then she's like, that's Keen. That's the older white guy. Then there's Taramin. That's the big black guy with the assault rifle. Then we come to Nemec. He's the young kid, young white kid who fell asleep in the beginning, and he's kind of like a thing. And then there's Cinta, who's like the medic nurse. That's her, Cinta. That's the brown lady.
Sita,
exactly. There we go. See, that's what they could have done with Salman. Where it didn't need to be so on the nose. They could have just maybe spelled it differently. That's Salaman. Something like that. Yeah, okay. Cinta. And everybody's just sort of upset with Vel that she didn't tell them that she's like, hey, we're short a man. And you see Taramin says like, hey, can I just have a word with you, Vel? And Vel's like, no, let's get Clem settled in first. So the small little thing I wanted to mention here is that now that we're well, firstly, I wanted to mention this was my Matrix reference.
Okay, I was waiting for it.
Okay, is this the one? Is this what you thought as well? Where it feels like Neo being introduced to the crew and Nemec is Mouse?
Exactly.
There we go. There we go.
Because he's also the guy he's the architect. He's building the little models.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost identical to that. So I'm guessing it was a deliberate reference then, if both of us realize that.
And If you remember from the Nebuchadnezzar, they all died.
I didn't remember that. That's probably maybe in Revolutions, right?
No, in the first, the Cypher, what's his name, pulls the plug on everybody and shoots
Oh yeah, that's true.
Tank, and
And so this guy remind me of Tank a lot, Terramin,
okay,
right? Because he is the big black guy with the gun.
okay. So
Yeah.
simplifying it a bit, but yeah.
No, but they look similar, and they have like that, especially when you have like a guy like Nemec, who's okay. So I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't think of that. Who do you think could be that guy?
That turns on him.
Cypher. Yeah. You think one of them could be on that? Maybe Skeen?
Yeah, Skeen? What is the name?
Skeen.
Skeen, the guy who woke up
Skeen.
the mouse.
Yeah,
Mauser.
Nemec. Yes.
Nemec.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. And his name is like Skeen. It sounds like a skeevy type of a name, you know?
And out of all of them, he was the only one that gave a bit of a shady vibe off.
Right, right. Caraman seems like like a proper soldier type of guy.
He's just worried about the mission where it's like, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 days.
Right. Cinta is just like a nurse, medic type of person. Nemec is just like...
She has no problem. She's
right.
She probably just finds Andor hot and she's like, yeah, let's go. And at least I can die looking at him.
You look hot with your beard all shaved.
Yeah, did you just shave that? That looks amazing.
Yeah. Dude,
is that why you shaved for this episode?
Yeah. No, I was gonna say that. So I was so like once I shaved, I was like, oh no, we're recording this episode today because I was like, this is the one time where I was like, oh shit, I wish we did this earlier. Now it just looks like I fucking shaved.
It's alright. You're in character for the episode.
I'm in character, exactly.
You gotta do that.
There we go. I was gonna tie when I had longer hair. I was gonna tie my hair if we were gonna do the Thor review. I was gonna do that full bun that he has, like when he's like meditating in the beginning of the scene. Yeah.
I hope you use the knife to shave.
Nice see me come back blade. With like full like fucking like my face is like carved off.
For the pod.
But yeah, for the pod, man, for the pod. And yeah, so I'm glad we both made that that comparison of Matrix. And so yeah, and now it's so yeah, the thing I wanted to mention was that that Terraman saying like, hey, can I have a word with you? And Vel's like, hey, no, let's get him settled in. So the comparison between now that we've met this group, this team, and another team, the Bureau team, where you have a clear leader and then you have people following them, and how even though they have like both of them are leaders, but the way the sort of this, I don't want to call them subordinates, but the subordinates interact with the leader is completely different. Where here there's so much of a human vibe, and there it's completely detached and cold. Where it's like just about the numbers, just do your job and don't talk about anything else. I don't want to hear anything else. That's what that chief was like. You were mentioning how everything, he was just so short and concise and to the point, and he didn't want to mention or hear any other nonsense, even an extra word.
Also, how with the Imperials it feels also mundane, where versus here everything feels so intense and like
right,
serious.
And everything's a surprise.
Yeah,
I agree. And also how the two leaders, where the chief is he knows exactly what to say, what not to say, what's on his mind, what's not on his mind, and Vel is like unsure. She's she's given this situation that she doesn't know how to handle, and now there's like kind of like a small little conflict between her and her, where there's no conflict on the other side. The conflict is between the two employees, but not within the authority and the subordinate. So we'll keep coming back to that from time to time, the more we get introduced to these people. And now we get to my favorite montage of my favorite character that just completely stole the whole episode for me. Is we just see this slow scenes of Karn, and I made a mention that he's now Karn. He's no longer Cyril. He's now transformed. He's now Karn, and sooner than later, he's gonna become Deputy Inspector Karn. Right? That's gonna be like, okay. So now we see him arrive on a station, which is this like a regular train station, and he's just got, because we didn't know what was going to happen. Like the Blevin was just like, you're not going to be replaced, but you're like on leave. He's kind of getting suspended, right? That's kind of the vibe that we got.
Yeah.
And now we just see him in like this quote, and he's got like 2 suitcases, and he's just walking. And he's just walking.
And
And you
long
just see
elevator.
him, and this long, he's walking through this bridge, and you see the shot from like far away with all these like buildings that look identical to each other. And his theme music is playing, which was like, it's giving me goosebumps just remembering. Like, I'm not even looking at the scene, I can just picture it, and the music is playing in my head, and it's like this. It starts off like when he was in the office, and his music, you kind of heard like a glimpse of his music, and it was like this sort of like deep dark music, and like he seemed kind of disturbed. At first I was like, you had all these things, but in this I was like he looks kind of like mental, like, and disturbed. And then you see him walk through all this, and you see like it sort of starts becoming sad.
Yeah.
And like pathetic, and like he starts
these
coming off as
long
like a
shots.
loser. Yeah, and he comes off as like a loser. And that's when I got like Joker vibes of like Joker just walking back to his house, those long ass, and he's climbing the stairs.
My thought was like, even Star Wars has a hood.
Oh, right, exactly.
Because it looks so dingy. It
Right.
looks so dirty, everything.
Right.
And also it gave me a lot of vibes of like Judge Dredd and their what do they call it? The mega city that they have. Or
Yeah,
like even
right.
like we've seen this before, this whole like everything the same. Even that, just like that in Star Wars, people have those sort of apartments. It's just so cool to
Right.
see. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
so we get to that where it's like, I wanted to mention the elevator scene where literally he's in the elevator and the elevator is going down, and then you see he could clearly, as an actor, just, he's got this look and he's just looking out the window, and then he just starts looking down, and he goes from like, I try to like write it in a thing where it's like he goes from stern to disturbed to like just plain sad and like ordinary, and he's just some guy who's like, where his character started off from like this soldier cool vibe into this action scene, and now he's just like blah, like, and then he comes into like this apartment building that just looks like so dingy, like you said, but it and then the scene stops, he rings the bell, and you see this lady opens, this like weird looking lady, and he's like, mother, and that's it, that's the only thing he says.
Yeah, amazing.
And she looks at him and she slaps him.
And the best
Go on.
is you see in the background, out of focus.
Yes,
right?
that's my
Like,
favorite scene.
somebody just watching.
That's my favorite
I love that they also went back to being like, "Get the hell out of here." And she's like,
That's my favorite scene.
"Oh."
that was the favorite scene that I wanted to make a note of. That not just like, okay, so first she slaps him, and then she just hugs him, and then she's like crying, and then all of a sudden she shouts at that old lady, and you can't even see the old lady's face properly because it's so out of focus.
Yeah, but she's
But
there
you
the
can
whole
see
time.
her go like, she's there the whole time just watching.
Yeah,
And you know that
can
this is
over his
exactly
shoulder.
what happens in real life.
Yeah.
And then the moment she goes, "Hey, what the hell are you looking at?" And she goes, "Oh my God." And she just, and
Oh,
those-
I have something else to do. I was look at this.
I
guy.
laughed so hard
It was
looking at
good.
her face, and that it was just
Dude,
like,
I was
like,
laughing the second she was in the background, but it's like, yeah, that's
Right.
hilarious. There's just somebody who's watching.
right, exactly. and like, especially like like looking at it as like the end to this long ass montage of no dialogue, this slow music, him just walking back, we're just looking at scenery from scenery, that's it. And it ends with this, with like, like you, and this one little scene. So I'm gonna go off on a tangent here, where it's all based on this, and like, hopefully I'm gonna make some predictions here. Okay, it really made me want to assume what his backstory is and where his character is gonna go from here. So firstly, it was like the Joker vibes I got was like him going back to this dingy apartment with his mother, and him just being like the sad loser type of a person, right? Where the Joker is trying to become a comedian, and he always tried to be a badass soldier. And here's the other assumption I'm going to make is that it's almost like what in my opinion may have happened is that I think it's when he was a kid, his father may have been like an imperial officer or like in the security guard or something. And then he must have gotten like killed or something by some rebel or some guy who sort of belongs to a Morlana type of an environment. And that made Karn want to be a badass soldier like his dad and avenge his dad and fight in his honor, right? That's why he's so emotional about two cops being murdered and the office, like the bureau, like the whole department not doing anything about it. But his mother, seeing how his father ended up, never wanted her son to go into that, and he rebelled against her and joined the forces and is now back to her where she's like she slaps him for being defiant, but she's also glad that he's back alive, unlike his dad. And I think these parallels of him and Cass's father are going to come into play later on.
Nice. You got all of that from Mother. I like that.
That's it, dude. From this whole scene and him just saying mother and what his interaction between them and him just he literally had the same look on him the entire time. His mother slapped him, hugged him, and was crying and brought him in.
It felt like he didn't think he was ever going to come back here.
And right, like, exactly. Yeah. And neither did the mother. Yeah, because she was surprised to see him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He got his tail between his legs where the mother was like, if you go, you're going. And he's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to honor my dad. And then something similar happens. And now he's got... So that's why it seemed like he was so out of his element in that first duty to like actually go fight on Morlana, where I think he waited his entire time in the corporals, where he was just waiting for a moment like this to fully actually act out his fantasies and avenge his dad rather than fight in his honor. And it's the inverse of Cass, where you see things from his perspective, and he's not some like cool upper class type like guy. He's just some guy that belongs to like a middle class, and him having this showed me all three classes within the Star Wars universe.
Nice.
And we're gonna get to upper class later on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if you're correct.
Right. I mean, I hope they can do anything with him, and it'll be interesting. But I have a feeling that might be it, and that would be kind of cool. But yeah. I have a lot more notes written on it, but I won't go deeper into it. But it's amazing seeing. We talked about how he says one line and you can put together so much of character, and you're just speculating and so enamored by him and his acting. And yeah. So now we go back to the rebels arguing over Clem and why they weren't told and consulted. And Vel says like, oh, no, I trust him. Don't worry. And now we get to Luthen's a different profession where he's on Coruscant and he's an art dealer. So now it's like, oh, okay, artifact dealer. Right. And you're like, oh, now it kind of makes sense why he was getting into a character like that. And then we see a character. I wanted to ask you how you felt about this. Where I think she's an important character. Where she's portrayed later.
Mothra. She's been
Maud Mothma.
Maud Mothra. Sorry, Moth.
You said Mothra. Yeah. my phone autocorrected it to Mothras.
No, she was basically in the original trilogy, but not played by the same actress. And then yes, this actress played her in Rogue One. And she's in a deleted scene of, I think, episode 3 or something like that. And yeah, she's amazing. She's overslated even in the little bit that she's done so far. So I'm glad that she's like a big part of the show, apparently, because she's great. But here is the part that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
Her ship, when she comes in.
Her car.
It looks so weird. And then the whole time I was looking at it. Is it because... The one thing that's easy to make in CGI is metal. It's one of the things they figured out first is how to make metal in CGI. So that's why I was like, this can't be like, there has to be a purpose to this, where like the design was just too smooth and it's based on like the ships that they use in Coruscant, and they kind of tried to implement that into like a car or whatever she was using, like with her chauffeur, and it was supposed to be this classy thing, but it looked really weird. It looked
Yes.
like
It looked like a candy car from like a 90s music video.
yes, exactly. It looked like CGI from the 90s at first.
And that's what made me ask the question, was that you think it was on purpose, where they know that they're gonna add stuff from the prequels? Did they do it on purpose, where they tried to make it close to the prequels, even though they look like that, because that's what the computer graphics were like that?
But
So that's my
they've
question to you,
used
because they could have easily made it look better.
they've used other things from the prequels and other properties of Star Wars where they didn't do that. So why would they do it now?
No, but like, like that's what I'm saying. Like maybe the writers or the show creator did it deliberately, where they're like, no, we're gonna try and we're not gonna act like we're better than. Maybe they're just trying to pay respect and homage to George Lucas himself, where we're like, we're not gonna try and outdo you. That so because that's the moment I saw that stood out to me so much, based on every other type of location and CGI moment we've seen in the show. Now we're in like we're in the second hour of this whole content, and we've seen so much detail, where everything is so detailed and everything is used so, like, sleek things look sleek, things look janky, real things look real. Why does this look? Because I think like this was the only prequel thing that they've used so far. But that's why I'm like, maybe they were just trying to be like, we're just gonna make it look like it did in the prequel, but just update it a little bit so that it doesn't stand out as much. Maybe
could
that
be.
was it.
It could be. It seemed like a
Right?
deliberate choice. It's either a
Right.
deliberate choice or it's some sort of shot that they had to do like last week, and is the best they could
Mm.
do.
I don't
Honestly,
know,
like
because
both
they had a
are
very
plausible.
important character scene in it that went on for a while. So I'm guessing that was written into the show.
Yeah, but maybe it was more about like originally she just like walks into Luthen's shop
Mm.
and then leaves, but they really wanted that shot of her like looking, or they had the shot of her looking down at the shop.
Oh, right, because
I'm
you don't see the
thinking,
car. Yeah, right,
and maybe originally the car wasn't supposed to be there, and somehow last minute they're like,
right,
no, let's add those two shots of the car coming in and leaving, just to give it a little bit more world building and like,
right,
give a vehicle that we can sell later as a toy or something.
right.
But again,
But even then, they could have made it look better. Because my only thing is, it's not about like the fact that whether it looks bad or good. It's more so about how close it looks to what it looked like in the prequels, like in terms of graphics itself.
But it still stuck out so much compared to everything
That
else.
so that's the
the weird
problem,
thing.
because or maybe another idea I had was that maybe they wanted to stick out so much because Coruscant is the capital of the
Coruscant.
galaxy. Like they
Coruscant.
No, it's Coruscant.
Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah,
Because like that's why I didn't understand. And I didn't understand what you're talking about. Coruscant. I was like,
you don't know that?
That's the capital, Coruscant. I was like, maybe I guess I never knew the name. Coruscant, bro.
Coruscant, dude. That's the
Yeah.
That's from the blooper reel of Kid Anakin from Phantom Menace. He kept saying Coruscant, and there's like George Lucas just getting fed up, saying like, "Cut, we'll just do it later."
I have not
I've seen
seen
that
this.
in like so many like other reviews and stuff where where the moment I saw this, I was like, "Oh my god, it's Coruscant!"
I was so
But yeah.
lost. I am so confused.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm sorry. I thought maybe you got that. But yeah, so Coruscant, because it's the capital of the galaxy, they wanted to stand out as like, this is super duper upper class, and it's like it's going to look very different from everything else that is in this universe. It's not just some rich place; it's like the richest of place. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, I still think they could have given the metal some sort of texture.
There
it
you
was
go.
so flat.
That's my point too.
You know,
That's my point as well.
it looked
That's
like
my
Windows
point as
3.5 type animation.
That's the thing where it looked, where it's, again, like I said, like it's not that it's,
It
I'm not
looked
even
worse
commenting
than
on
the
whether it's
prequels,
good or bad,
honestly.
but it just looks so similar to that, where I'm like, that has to be a deliberate choice. given how much detail they've put into every single thing so far. So
They
I'm
were-
just gonna like,
yeah.
I'm gonna give them credit for that.
It's
like,
a prequel to a movie
benefit of credit.
from the 70s, so
Right.
maybe they were like, like had they CGI, would they have
Right.
had CGI in the
Exactly.
70s? This is what it would look like. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
They should have just used the
And
model.
I agree. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see. And maybe we'll find out after the show is done. We'll do some interview checking and stuff like that. We'll see
Yeah,
what they
sure,
say.
we'll check it out.
I'm sure people will be questioning about this.
They
Yeah,
usually
alright,
do very good breakdowns on Disney Plus for these shows. The making
like
of,
commentary and stuff.
and they do like a full hour and a half,
Right.
like, little documentary on the making of.
That'll be good. We'll do a part on that as well.
I'm down.
Yeah. Once we're done with the full show.
Yeah.
Because it'll be cool to have all these questions compiled and then have them maybe hopefully answered in these things.
True.
Or not answered. That'll be answering questions itself. So all right. So now we're introduced to young Senator Mon Mothma, and she meets Luthen, and you see that they know each other from before, and that they have a sort of not relationship in that sense, but like they've dealt with each other before. And Clea, who's the assistant of Luthen, he mentions that Mon Mothma's with a new driver.
Yeah.
And that comes in later where you're like, oh, okay, so assistant's in it as well, where then they start talking about artifacts and stuff like that. And the Clea, Luthen's assistant, sort of distracts the driver, and she's like, hey, let me show you something. And
I also think
yeah.
there's a lot of Easter eggs in those artifacts, I think, because I'm pretty sure I saw a Gungan shield from the Phantom Menace. So yeah, there's probably a lot of cool stuff in there.
This happens after Phantom Menace, right?
Yeah.
Right.
This happens before A New Hope.
Right. Okay. So it's between Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? I think, yeah. All right. So she distracts
of the Sith, that's called the third one of the prequel.
That's the third one, right? Yeah.
Isn't that the third one of the original trilogy?
That's Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. Then what was the second one?
Attack of the Clones. How do I know more about this than you?
No, Attack of the Clones was the prequel second one. What was the second one from the original trilogy?
Empire Strikes Back. Literally the only movie that's held this entire franchise, this billion-dollar franchise together.
It's too late, bro.
It's too late, dude. That's what's happening.
My brain can't remember these things. I'm so confused.
Oh my god.
I'm like, Karaskin, what is this?
Karaskin. No, we're almost there. We're almost there. We're halfway through. We'll try and power through. We'll try and power through this quickly. So they sort of get back into the back room, and then they immediately break character into their spy role, and we're like, oh, okay. So she's a spy and he's a spy. Obviously, we know that he's a spy, but we sort of get to know what, like, Mon Mothma is a spy within the Imperial Order, and she, I think, takes out funds, and I think that's her job, where she gives funds to Luthen to fund all these other things. And you can tell by the relationship where Luthen is sort of superior to her as well in terms of chain of command. And she's like really scared. She's like, I feel like I'm under siege. There's a new Imperial spy every day, and I'm getting a new driver. And the moment all this was happening, the first phrase that went through my mind was, finally, we're in a Star Wars spy thriller. It's happening. After 3 episodes where it felt like more of like a Blade Runner type thriller, like dingy and film noir type thriller, we're now in a spy thriller based in the Star Wars universe. And there's tension, and there's deceit, and we don't know what's really going on, and mystery, like you mentioned. And yeah, and I said yay. And then he gives her, they mention like, don't worry, and he gives her sort of like a kind word in code, and he gives her an artifact, and he's like, you can give this to your husband. And we're like, oh, she has got a husband. So that's how she's involved in this. And,
the two things I really liked in the scene were, first of all, the start of where you're at first not sure what the hell's going on, and then Luthen's assistant taking the driver away, and you're already kind of
Right.
like, oh, okay, they're about to, and then they like disappear in the back. And I liked also that she's telling Luthen that she's bringing in a new guy. Same way
Oh,
that
right.
Luthen just did that to
Right.
somebody else, and he's like, "What the hell? Well, how can you
Yeah.
do like what is this?"
Right.
And also, I like the line of like, "Of course that you can trust me. If like this blows up, it's me first. I'm the face of
Right.
this operation."
Yeah. I'm gonna fall first,
Yeah,
and yeah. So you see what so you see what's at stake for our characters, and you
yeah,
see why they feel the way they do. It's not just like they're involved in some plot. You see how like them being in these really tense situations is keeping them tense, and how scared they are and how vulnerable they feel. And we understand the gravity of the situation by just these character moments.
yeah.
And yeah, and they give you kind word to each other, and she leaves, and she said, and then there's this nice little shot of her just sitting in the car, and you can see that she lets out a long sigh, and she's really scared. And you're like, oh shit, like, for she see, because the scene started off with her being like in that same character, but we don't see her get into character like we saw Luthen.
Yeah.
So we don't really know. And then we see her be herself in the middle, and then at the end, where you're like, now you see how she really feels, because even when she's with Luthen, she's trying to put up a brave front. She's telling him how she feels, but we don't really see it because she's trying to stay in between those two characters of the Imperial character and the brave front that she's trying to put up to Luthen. And then now the third is her by herself, sort of in the back of this car, where she's just really scared. And it's amazing how in just one scene we got introduced to this new character, and we see, well, who she is, what she's up against, and how she really feels all about it, and what is her significance in this entire story, and how she's connected to other characters. And this is just one scene. We get to know all these things. And now we move to back to the rebel base, where we're now introduced to Lieutenant Gorn. I don't know if you've played Gorn. It kind of made me smile when they said Lieutenant Gorn. He's the
Okay.
black man. Oh, you haven't played Gorn in VR? It's really
Also, I
fun.
would call that a camp more than a base.
Right. Okay. Right. You're right. It's got like a 10-10. That's it. You're right. It's their rebel base camp, and you see Lieutenant coming on a speeder, and Cass is like, "Hey, what's up?" And Cinta's like, "Don't worry, he's with us." And he's super upset about Clem, and Val introduces them together, and you see like Clem and Gorn have nice little banter between. Clem's like, "Whoa, what do you mean you're not unsure about what and this and that?" And uh, they sort of have now conflict and drama between them, Gorn and Clem, and he explains to Vel that there's patrols on Stone Canyon, and there's an Imperial engineer arriving from Coruscant. Where we're like, oh, who's that going to be? And now we're introduced to Mon Mothma's house, which is the super upper class house, which was now we've seen Cass is low class, and we've seen Karn is middle class, and now we see Mon Mothma is super upper class. And you have staff everywhere, and she like, she just enters and everything's sleek and like super rich. And she enters the dining with this white, and everything's glowing, and you see her husband in like a bath. They're just sort of discussing that there's going to be a dinner tonight with the governor and this kind of friends. So they're having these high-end dinners, and she you can see that there's conflict between her and the husband, where the husband's like, well, I've invited these people, and she's like, hey, all these people hate me. They've tried to undo everything I've tried to do. And they're like, oh, don't worry. And he's trying to be smart ass, and she's like not having it. And then
Hey,
there's an important moment. Yeah, sorry.
but I was just gonna say that the one of the reasons I really appreciate the show so far is this exploration of the dichotomy of this universe, where just going into these different caste systems or whatever you class systems,
Yes.
whatever you want to call
Yeah.
them, Very interesting. I love that sort of stuff where like
Right.
I'm a huge Marvel fan, and like almost wish they would do more of that as well. Like no, especially in their shows, use that time to really like explore things more. Like now
Right.
that you have the time to do it, and I really appreciate that. That is
Mm.
kind of like so far what this show has been doing more than anything. Is use
Right.
this time to really like flesh out
Right.
ideas and the world, and yeah, great. I feel like the show will
Yeah,
have a huge impact on the Star Wars lore in general.
I was just going to mention that you saying all this just made me realize that we're in episode 4 of just one show, and I think this show has done more world building, more detailed world building of Star Wars than like any of the new movies or any of like Solo, Rogue One, any of the new trilogy movies. Obviously, they've done world building, but the way I understand it as a viewer, where who doesn't know Star Wars, who doesn't really, I mean, I've seen the movies, but it's like now I understand the universe of Star Wars and I understand what kind of world we're living and I understand, and it's literally, and it's not like I said before, it's not just a scene after scene of them explaining that this is what this is what you just find out as the story moves along and these things are introduced to you naturally, and you understand more and more and more, like in more and more detail, and you start piecing things together as a viewer rather than them spoon feeding you like there's upper class and there's what things happen. You just see it from how they talk to each other. And you like you've seen this kind of same kind of, like you said, an office type of a morning meeting. You've seen it in a different setting. You've seen this kind of like an upper class husband wife drama in like different settings. But in this, it just like builds so much more character and so much more of the universe where you're like, oh, I'm actually interested in everything that they're saying because it's making me understand more and more information either about characters, either about the world building or the story. Where now where she gets where he makes a smart joke about saying like she's like, oh, don't sit me next to them, and he's like, oh no, you'll be seated next to the boring section. These are the fun people, and she's like, oh, you think these people are fun? You know, they've cut off the shipping transport path or something. She's like, do you know how many people will starve because of that? So you get to know like these are the people she's talking about and how she looks at them being like a rebel spy, and how her husband, who's an actual upper class guy, doesn't really look at these things or doesn't even really care about them, where he's just like, oh, I'm having dinner with like politicians and stuff. And yeah, and a small little detail of like while they're having this argument, a staff member comes in to like put the place down, and Mothma's like, no, not now, get out of here. And I'm like, that seems so real, like in an upper class thing where you would just have so much staff where they would just enter these moments and they would be completely detached, but you would be like, no, 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 get out of here. And it's like, I've been in the situation that I'm not super class with. But yeah, I wanted to just make a note of that. And a small little, nice little referential joke of Perrin is the name of the husband. And as Mothma storms out of the dining room, Perrin's like, oh, come on, must everything be boring and sad? And I was like, oh yeah, see, that's nice little self-referential humor, not like She-Hulk where it's like so on the nose and it's like patting themselves on the back for being here. It's like doled out in within the same plot, and the last 3 episodes have been really sad, and things are sad and boring, but they're just trying to put in levity into these kind of heavy situations. I thought that was kind of fun. And now we come to your favorite scene, which is Vel going over the plan, and they've got like small little like models set up, and she's explaining
Love the
everything.
models. I love that
Right.
they
I
have a
was like,
guy
wow.
just to make models.
Yes. And he's so into it too. It kind
Yeah,
of
it's
reminded me
like
of you
it's
setting
a
up your
fragile one.
Lego.
Yeah,
Like, hey, like, so be careful of that set. And I was like, oh yeah, I get it, bro. I know
yeah.
what you mean. And yeah, and they introduce a Rono, which Cass is like a box freighter, and he's like, yeah, well, you can fly that, right? He's like, yeah, I can pilot a box freighter. And you see, like, oh, maybe that's the only reason they got him is because he can pilot that thing.
Yeah.
And Clem is like explaining his concerns, and he's unsure about the plan. He's like, what the hell? This seems crazy. That those were TIE fighters. They'll easily catch you. And as he's explaining his concerns, all
Well,
his concern, yeah.
I Don't remember what exactly it was, but they were talking about what is all at the base, protecting this one entrance. And
So wait, so hold on with that. Let me get to that real quick. Where he's Clem is just explaining, and all his questions are being answered one by each member. It's like they'll catch us in a mere seconds, and Terramin is like 9 seconds we calculated, and this and that. And then I wanted to ask you where they start talking about that there's going to be a celestial event at a place called the wait for first Clem calls it a suicide run. He's like, that's a suicide run. And they're like, that's the only reason the Imperials only have 40 people on the lookout, because they know that no one's going to ever try to do something like this. And
but
then Skeen
it
goes,
was at
except us.
at the beginning when the scene starts as they pull out. That's when she's saying,
Oh, okay.
there's this thing and that thing, and they're all here just to protect this one entrance. And that was the point where it was like, okay, this sounds like fuck it. That's what it starts being like, okay, this sounds like crazy. I forgot what it was. It was like it sounded like some sort of defense drone or a turret or something, but just the way it sounded, I was like, that sounds freaking serious. But yeah, continue.
They built like some dam or something, she was explaining, I remember.
Yeah, they
Like,
also have the river, and
right. And and then she mentions this thing called the Nazma Brani, which I wanted to ask you. When they showed the little stone model of it, it reminded me of, I'm not sure about this, but it kind of reminded me of that Baby Yoda place in season 2, at the end of season 2. Remember when Baby Yoda goes to this special place to like sit there, and he gets, yeah.
I don't
Maybe
know.
it looked like that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
they're talking
remember the
about
arches around Grogu. I thought he was just on a rock next to a tree.
Actually, the arches is what made me kind of think of that.
Maybe, I don't know. It's been a minute since I've seen it.
So yeah, okay. So that was a small little thing. And then Lieutenant Gorn explains that there's actually a celestial event that all the Aldanis used to gather for. And it's called this made me giggle a little bit because the way they say it. And he says the words in succession goes like Nazma Brani, Magbani, Eldani, the Eye of Aldani. And I was like, did Dr. Seuss wrote that? Like, write that? Like, I was laughing so hard because they're talking about this space event and celestial event, and he's like, it's called the Eye of Aldani. I thought that was just sounded really funny.
But I loved,
yeah.
I'm so ready to see it where he says it.
Yes,
it drapes the entire sky in stars. Where like, is that a reference to the wipes that Lucas always did in Star Wars? It's just kind of like a curtain.
For me, it was just like the way he was describing it. Like it's like 50 meteor showers, and it's like the window to the galaxy, and it was like even Clem was like in disbelief, and he's like, "You've seen this?" Yeah. And it keeps bringing me back to like how Clem is just some guy on some like town, where even though they're in space, they still don't know about all these, like, everything is so new to him in this episode where he's finding out all these cool new things.
What was your read on him going every 3 years?
Yeah, so oh right. Oh yeah. So first Gorn explains that he's like, I've been here for 7 years and he's seen it twice, and it happens I think every 3 years, he said. And I actually didn't notice that, like, take like, too much notice of that.
It's a bit later where like then he explains what it is and so on, and then Cass takes like a moment to like every 3 years. Well, my first thought was like, is he wondering if this is about to like he's like doing the math, okay, 7 twice, like do we have to wait 2 more years? And then the lady's like, no, in 3 days this is what's going to happen. And stuff. So I don't know.
Well,
that was my read on it. That like he was maybe thinking that like how long till this happens again? Is it like years, months?
Well, so maybe Gorn must have seen it in the first year, and then seen it 3 years later, and then now it's 3 years later.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, something like that. That makes sense. But yeah, that's true. I'm waiting to see. I have a feeling maybe Gorn might be up to something because he's got those Imperial robes, and you can tell that maybe he's a spy as well in the Imperial thing, and he comes back he does come back for a quick second where Vel's like, how much time do you have? And he's like, just a quick. And I have like he makes a quick mention of like, I have this midnight duty or something like that. So yeah, and this really made me actually really appreciate how like the show has slowly started and gradually started to introduce Star Wars into this grungy spy thriller. If you really think about it, where it's like it starts off on this planet, on this random thing where everything is slow, like so dirty and thing, and then they slowly introduce spaceships, and now we're getting into the magic. It's not like all that thrown at you all at once, and it's also completely not taken out. Where I thought the whole show will just be super grounded and everything will be like more like, we're gonna stay away from the super fantasy stuff. We'll obviously have them in there, but it's gonna be more of like a spy thriller and a bureaucratic espionage type of a thing grounded in the Star Wars universe. I love that they're introducing these kind of cool magical kind of a things, and but they're doing it slowly where you're now like, oh, okay, now we're in Star Wars. Wow, it's magic is might happen.
If you want to be corny about it, you could say we're kind of like Cass on when the very beginning on the flashbacks on the planet, and the show is his mom taking us on this trip, and we're slowly learning about this world from the inside out.
So that's I actually don't even want to be corny about it because that's exactly what I wrote. Where I mean, not in like not the way you said it. You said it actually. I didn't write it the way you said it. Where actually your phrasing of like learning the world from inside out is very cool. Like I didn't actually think of it from that point of view, but mine was just more so like Cass is like the vehicle that we're sort of witnessing the world through.
It's all, but like it's like expanding because of now Luthen and so on. Where like we were in Cass's world, and now with Luthen, it's slowly widening. And at the same time, with the Imperials, it's like growing into these different strands everywhere.
Right. And it's all connected to everything we've known, and everything is like slowly progressing. Where it's not just all at once. We're just like, and the best part is that, see, if Cass wasn't as surprised and at discovering these things, we may not have been surprised because we've known Star Wars a lot. So it's cool to see it from it's almost like, where it's like you've seen all the Star Wars and you go meet someone who's never seen Star Wars and you show them the original trilogy and you sort of live like through their eyes, like vicariously through them.
I would argue that like a lot of this we haven't seen in Star Wars. This is very new in terms of the look and the feel and everything. So it still feels like that.
It still feels new.
Like even though there's a TIE fighter and there's Coruscant and all that, but at the same time you're like, I don't know what to expect. I haven't seen this before. I can't like compare it to something else in Star Wars, and I think that's what keeps it very interesting.
Right. It's got Star Wars elements, but it's still keeping it fresh and building upon those elements rather than just rehashing old stuff. I think that's the biggest thing I have like from the show, where it's integrating all those things that the Star Wars content has built up, but it's using elements from it, balancing out in like a very unique, fresh story, and it's building upon new things that we're like, we know magic exists, but now we're getting to see what something magical might look like to someone who's in the Star Wars, and even to someone like us, where it's like new. Right? All right. And now we're at Mira and Blevin are sort of giving their spiel to the chief back in the bureau. And she's like, hey, denied my request. And she explains that she starts explaining to the chief that she has a hunch, and she's being coordinated activity of an organized rebellion. And Blevin sort of scoffs at this, and the chief sends Blevin out, and he sort of reprimands again Mira that, hey, why do we bring you here? And you've been here 2 years. You're managing 2 sectors. Blevin is managing 6 sectors. So I don't want to hear about any of this. Bring me back your numbers on your other things were great. Bring me back more reports, and don't spend your time on all this nonsense. And he gives her a nice word, and he tells her, we're done. And then he just walks out. And the moment he leaves, you see Mira going like, and you could just tell that she was like holding in, like, so that's another big difference in between. She was like afraid of the chief. Whereas Taramin and Lieutenant Gorn, even though Vel is their leader and Vel makes the last decisions, and there's like this difference of like democracy versus like I don't know what the opposite of democracy I could use, but like fascism, I guess, where you just have one person who dictates everything and you have everyone just follows them out of fear. Whereas in the Rebel Alliance, it's not a complete democracy, even though everyone gets a say. It's still Vel's the leader and she makes these decisions. And it's just cool to see how, even though there's these two similarities between how the chain of command works, but still how everyone communicates with each other based on who the people are and where they're based.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And now we get to the last scene, which is there's a late night bonfire. Everyone's eating. And Taramin comes to him with the little janky iPad. He's like, hey, you know how to use this device? To Clem. He's like, here's the Aldani phrase book. And he gives it to him. And he's like, can I eat my food? And
That's where you see like Cass is still a little shit. And I like how many buttons he has to press to go through everything on the book. He's like, do you know this? Okay, and that, yeah.
Yeah. And at first he's like, yeah, I know this. And he gives it. And Vel sort of just gives him an order like, you're going to eat. You're going to get your thing taken care of by Sinto. You're going to learn the phrase. And I'm going to go take the first shift. And you just see her go take the first shift.
You're going to learn all of this by tomorrow morning.
But yes, she gives him a very direct order. Like, you're going to, yeah.
But I liked how it was like, first you're going to finish your food, then the bandages, then you're going to learn this. Like, so
yes.
I am your leader, but also this is a group. We're working on this. We're in this together. Where like with the Imperials, it would have been like, shut up and do it. Where here it's like, I heard you. That's okay. You do that thing. And then we make sure you're taken care of. But this still needs to be done.
Exactly. There we go.
Again, I love the dynamic of everybody already. Very well done.
I agree. And and then you see just like the camera just holds on Cass's face. And I kind of took it as like, this is the first time it kind of seemed to us where he seems unsure of the position that he's in and he totally feels out of his element, which is the same as Vel, which is the same as Mira in the Bureau and Karn, where they've all maybe bitten off more than they can chew. And first we've seen Cass sort of get out of situations, and Karn being in a situation like this, we saw Karn fail. And now it's Cass's turn and Vel's turn and Mira's turn where Mira we haven't gotten there, but Vel and Cass's turn to really see now we're sort of out of our element. We're unsure. And are we going to triumph or are we going to fail like Karn?
I could totally see it as that. For me, I saw more as like really confident. I don't know.
Really?
For me, it looked like, I don't know, like there is a look of uncertainty, but like the way that he handled himself in this whole group, it really felt like he's sussing them out, and everything he's hearing is like, you have it covered. Okay, that is how you do it. Like you see how he gets a little bit excited when he's like, he thinks this is not possible at all. This is a suicide mission. But they're saying things where he's like, holy shit, okay, maybe this is possible. And like I think for me, I felt a sense of confidence in the whole thing. Where in the end, what you said, I can totally read it as that too. But at that point, by then, I was like, with him also being like, "Can I first eat? Like, I'm going to do this. Like, I got this covered. Like, let me eat first. You don't need to babysit me on this." And yeah, it seems like he's finally. This is where he's starting. You could see it as he's starting to feel like this is where he belongs. This is what he's been looking for in a way, where like he's been this scoundrel and like doing this and that, running away from war and like trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. But he's realizing that like, okay, he has a lot of people they keep mentioning this too, that like it's the belief. The little guy says that too. That Nemec, he's like, I feel like he has the same belief as we do. And that makes me want to trust him and all that. And I feel like it's him feeling the same thing where he's like, there's people who feel the same as me. And I can actually finally do something. Like Luther was been saying that like, this is actually what he has been wanting to do. Maybe he himself didn't even know. And he's starting to realize it now. He's like, oh, even if it's a suicide mission, It has a purpose. There's people like me
Mm.
right here, and I'm finding a spot of. He's finding a purpose for his life. Where before he was very aimless, which was kind of like what they were showing in the first 3 episodes, where like he's just fucking around with everybody, lying to everyone, being shifty and like doing sleazy shit left and right, and like he's just kind of existing and going with the flow. Where like now he has a purpose in life. Like even if he dies, he
Mm.
died for a cause.
Mm. That's very interesting, actually. That you and I have almost opposite
Yeah.
reactions to this, where I kind of saw it as like, oh, maybe I am like, maybe I'm not sure, and it's like almost like a front of confidence, because and it's almost like I kind of looked at it as like he's almost already trying to plan his escape out of this situation, because he's always ran from situations.
Yeah.
And it's like, will this make him run, or will this make him go further and further? And it's good that you mentioned Nemec saying that I believe that he shares that belief. That's another thing that I just noticed, that this is, I think, one of the first few mentions of someone talking about belief and stuff like that, which
I
is what the
mean,
Force is connected to.
yes, but it also like Lutheran, that was the thing he was realizing, and how he
Right.
was connecting with Cass, where he's like, the reason I chose you is because I feel like you feel the same as me. That like
Our shared hatred for the Empire.
yeah, yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, the fact that we both have different reads on it goes back to the
Yeah.
point that like nothing seems
Yeah.
like we
Is that what
know.
it seems?
Yeah, it doesn't, like we don't know where it's going. We don't know if anything's real.
Right.
We don't know who's playing who. Where like
Right.
even if they're not doing it, I love the fact that like just from the vibe of the show, I've had it the
Yeah.
whole time. Like it's nothing else but the vibe of the show making me feel like, oh, I don't trust anybody.
Right.
Everybody's out for their own. Like
Mm.
yeah,
Well, that goes back to the main theme of whether self-sacrifice versus self-interest.
yeah,
Where are our characters going to land? Because we're still unsure, and that's what
exactly.
makes them so intriguing. And because they've shown to be flawed characters, all of them,
Yep.
where you're always unsure as a viewer, where you're like, I don't know whether they're going to land here or there. We'll just have to watch and find out. Like, that's one of the best things a show can do for you, is build up that intrigue and mystery in not just the plot but also in the characters, where obviously you need like a interesting plot, but when you have characters where you're invested in, and you're not sure where they're going to land, it makes the show so much better and so much more like fascinating to wait for and to speculate on.
There's the game called The Last of Us, and Neil
Mm.
Druckmann is the director of that game. He wrote it also, and he said something really interesting of like why he thinks that game works and
Mm.
what makes it different from others. And he's like, simple story,
Right.
interesting characters.
Yes.
And that is why The Last of Us like is so different than other games, because it's really works. It's focusing so much on the characters. The story is go from A to B. But
Yes.
what happens on the way, who they meet, how they interact with them, is
Exactly.
what makes it one of the greatest video game stories of all time. Because everything means so much more. Where like it's the old saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
You know?
And which is one of the biggest things about just going back the original trilogy, A New Hope, and especially Empire Strikes Back. The reason, and this was the biggest complaint that people had with George Lucas, is that he didn't realize what made Star Wars great when he made the prequels. He tried to do the opposite of what made it great, which was having a simple story but really interesting characters based in a framework of like sci-fi fantasy, which is new to people and was interesting and fascinating to people, where he tried to take all the boring parts and try to make it bigger, and take all the characters and make them as one-dimensional and as like surface level as possible.
I would argue though that like at least the Phantom Menace, maybe even the Attack of the Clones, the story is pretty damn basic. That's what
Right.
shocked me
Okay.
when I rewatched him. Whereas like
Obviously, yeah.
he went basic story, basic character.
Yeah, exactly. That he did the worst thing in terms of going
Like
basic
Phantom
story.
Menace is the characters start on one planet, they run
Yeah.
away to another planet, then they go to a Senate, and then they come back to the first planet. Like
That's it.
that's it. They kind of just like run away and come back. In between, they pick up a little boy that's pod racing.
Oh my god, that sounds so bad.
But that's pretty much what it is. And then
Right.
Attack
Oh,
of the Clones is half of it is just Obi-Wan Kenobi learning about the clone facility.
yeah.
It
So
just
so
keeps
actually,
going.
if you look at that kind of a scene, and as like if that scene was in this story, it would have been so interesting for some reason or the other.
Yeah.
If you think about it, right?
Yeah,
Just Obi-Wan coming to a clone factory and meeting these cool looking, weird looking aliens and learning about this thing just for a long time. That scene done in this show, I'm 100% sure it would have been so much more interesting and so much more like so much cooler to watch and to see like the clones and like that basic shit would have been so much more fascinating to see than it was even at all in whatever fucking
Attack of
movie
the
that
Clones.
was. There we go. And yeah, so he was out of his element. And one thing I made to notice that he's back in the jungle now, from when he was a kid to now. That's the parallels of I feel
Forest, but yes.
yeah, and I kind of made a small little quick note of like it goes back, and maybe there's a parallel of what he was as a kid trying to join the older kids going on that hunting mission.
Yeah.
He was like more excited and he had intrigue and he wanted to look cool. And now he's in this thing where he's again. That's where I got more feelings of like him being unsure, because now he seems to be, because he was always like scamming like people of his own type in Morlana, but now he seems to be around maybe a lot more seasoned people and a lot more focused people on like a fixed mission. And he's like, oh my god, where have I gotten myself into? Like, I'm a thief and I can pilot a bunch of things, but am I really ready for this? And it's almost like he's that like amateur in a world of experienced people. And when he was a kid, he was naive and he didn't know what to expect, so he was just excited. And now he's like, dude, can I really do this, or do I need to like get out of here like I normally do in most situations?
Also
Which is what he mentioned as his that would be his choice in the first scene of the episode, where he tells Luthen, "You can just drop me off and I can run off from here."
I also just realized first episode where there was no flashback. I think that's why I liked it a lot more.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, there's no flashback. Did we need that kind of time for flashback? So we'll get into all that later, I guess.
They're filling in his past as we go along. Where this time we found out that, like, yeah, when he was 16, he was in a war as a cook.
So that, I guess that's all we needed. We didn't really. Yeah, you're right.
But same time, like you said, if like what you're saying does make sense, it is very similar to him joining the group of the hunters. So there's
right
the parallels.
maybe for the first time he's back in that, and he's back in the jungle as well, where they're sort of in like a base camp like he was when he was a kid, and maybe that's why we needed to see all the flashbacks. But yeah, you want to elaborate on something, or should we just quickly get into a few things that we felt good, bad, or any questions we have?
Yeah, let's
And
slowly wrap this up.
right, so the episode wraps up just with that shot on his face of whatever he was feeling, but it just held out on his face for a second. So it was sort of like the same shot that he had at the end of episode 3. Maybe they're just like holding on his face just to give it like a little more depth to the
Andor.
to the end of the episode.
You start with Andor, the text, and then you end with Andor, the face.
There you go. So
but
maybe we're just looking too much into
like cut, and you're like, yeah, let's fucking go.
Exactly. You're like, okay, we're ready. Yeah. And also one thing I just wanted to quickly mention was the plan that they mentioned is that they'll be their entire heist plan is that they're gonna go steal the armory, go up against the garrison, and use the whole celestial moment as their getaway escape route, where the distraction where it's on for like a couple of moments where they can go in and out without someone noticing if they're able to escape on time. That's the plot and the heist that they're gonna go forward with later on.
Let's see how it works out.
Yeah,
who's going?
Let's see how it works
out. Are they
out,
all going to make it out? Is anyone going to double cross, crisscross?
No. Ooh.
Can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait. Any other things you want to maybe talk about? Some things you may have liked, disliked?
I think we covered most of it.
right?
during the breakdown. Like I said, I
Yeah.
think my favorite scene was still Stellan Skarsgård getting into character. Then
Yeah,
his
same.
Joker hand movements.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, great.
For me, it was that, and obviously the whole montage of Karn going back to his home. Those were the two standout moments for me. And I'll mention two things that I felt bad about, which is not bad with the episode, but with the show so far. Which is that the show starts off with the first scene is him looking for his sister, right? And the first episode ends with showing us a very emotional scene of him leaving his sister behind. And then we get to know that that was the last moment that he saw his sister. So he was what, like maybe 10, 11 years old, 12 years old in that flashback. And now he's like 30 and he's still looking for his sister. We, as the audience, that's the mission that he was on. And now he got sidetracked because of the cop situation. He fucked up those cops and now he got sidetracked. We're now 4 episodes deep and he has not once mentioned anything about his sister, anything about regret, guilt, or his longing to meet his sister, or any kind of urgency
It's
to
called
look for her.
it's called foreshadowing. To be fair, it's not like she just got lost on Friday and he's looking for her because if he doesn't find her, she's going to die. It's like he hasn't seen her in
No,
20, 30, like 30 years. And like he just is like, no, I want to find her again. Or like maybe it's just something he's been doing on the side the whole time. But like it doesn't seem like it was his main object. Like it's not an urgent mission. It's something that he wanted to do on the side, that like he just wanted to find his sister eventually. But right now that doesn't like it. He has way more important shit to do. We're like,
no.
but
So
it's set up, and it's definitely, I'm sure it's going to come into play eventually.
I agree with everything you said. My point is about more so about like the fact that like it seemed very important to him because he got himself into so much trouble by using the words canary to the prostitute at the brothel and all these things. Now, so my point is that throughout 4 episodes going through all of this, they could have very easily had him just say things like, I can't do this, I have to go find my sister. Or some mention that, hey man, I was looking for my sister and now I got into this mess. And while I'm trying to get out of this mess, I still need to go find my sister. I personally, even though it doesn't take away from the show at all, I personally would have liked some kind of mention where if not urgency, but at least some kind of guilt or regret that he's feeling that, hey man, I still haven't found my sister.
I tell
Like
you what
talking to
it plays
Bix
into.
or Marva.
No, I don't think it needs it because it plays totally into the spy thriller thing where like that's personal information that like the last time it came up, he got into this mess, and the more people know about you in this world, the way that they're playing it right now is the more vulnerable you're making yourself. Where like, yeah, he talked to Marva for like 30 seconds where she was yelling at him. Like at what point was
For saying the word Kanari.
and on top of that, had he told her what he was doing, she would have yelled at him even more because he's going out there being like, I'm looking for a canary woman. You know, it's like the last person he probably wants to talk about this, but like tell about this. And then who can he really tell at this point? It's something
Bix,
that is,
maybe.
I don't think it's needed. It shows that the Cass from that planet, that is still his thing. That has not, like, Marvel took him away from that. Him, like, that's what those flashbacks were. Like him looking for his sister was trying to connect back to that world, which he feels like he was taken away from, and went to jail, which also they dropped in here. Before he went to a war, he was 2 years in jail. And like, obviously his life has been absolute shit. And it's probably the thing of like, what would have happened had I not left Canary? What is if I had not left my sister? But it's a personal mission, which again, I don't think he has to tell anybody. It's something that later on when it comes up, like his father or something, these are vulnerabilities when you're a spy.
Right.
And right now, I'm probably reading into it, but I really hope that I'm not from the whole thing that like, I don't think everybody is who we think they are. Where like there's going to be reveals of people having ulterior motives that like have been there from the beginning, and it will put certain things into different perspectives. You know?
So okay, yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you had a very good explanation for that. Where that settles my thing for that, and I'm glad you mentioned ulterior motives because that piggybacks onto my last point about this is not a bad thing, this is a good thing, where we're talking about um, a really good thing that I saw, that how you mentioned about we don't know where the characters lie and who they are. They might not seem as it is, where they're all flawed characters. They're not like textbook where it's like this is the good guy, bad guy, this is this, this is that. Where it and they all have similarities between. We as audiences still aren't sure whether all these characters. So I'm going to take Cass, Karn, and Mira, where we don't know whatever they're doing. Are they doing it for the greater good, or is it like a personal ulterior motive that they're using a situation as an excuse? So is Cass doing it? Is Cass doing it for Cass money? Cash money?
You wrote that down, didn't you?
I wrote that down. The moment I wrote it, I was like, is Cass doing it for Cass money? And I laughed out so loud to myself. Because I didn't think of it. When I wrote it down, I realized it. Or is he actually in it now to fight for the greater good? Was Karn really trying to honor defend the honor of the two cops that were murdered? And does he really think that that's a noble thing to do? Or does he have like either an ulterior motive, or if it's like an insecurity that they're trying to fulfill, where is Cass trying to just do this for this or for that? Is Karn trying to do it to honor the two cops and do what's right, or is he doing it out of some personal insecurity that he's projecting? And same with now Mira, where is that she tells the chief, hey, I'm just looking for the Star Path unit finder because I have a hunch that there's coordinated attacks of an organized rebellion. We as the audience know she's right, but everyone else thinks she's just coming up to jump to conclusions. She's only doing this just to climb up the corporate ladder. So we still don't know what any of their actual motives are for all these main characters that we're introduced to.
And that's what keeps it intriguing, because
yes,
you keep wondering, and each scene or each new event makes you think maybe it's something else. Like I said, but that's why like Luthen is like the big like beacon of being like, look, this guy is so wishy-washy and shit. Be on your toes with everybody.
Exactly. And we've and all the other characters have shown to be wishy-washy in their own right. So we actually believe anytime they go here or there, we kind of believe and we kind of have our doubts at the same time. Where yeah, you're right. It keeps it so much more interesting. And while we're waiting to see where they land as characters, the interesting thing is that the story keeps moving along.
Yeah,
it's not that the story stops at any moment. Every scene and every character moment that we have is moving the story along. And so every time we're like, is this character going to land here or there? Because now they're suddenly in a progressive state of the story, and we're like, oh, now what are they going to do? Now what are they going to do? And they do something, and we're like, oh, okay, that kind of solved my doubts. And it's like, oh, that kind of made me concerned or worried again, where I don't know if they're actually saying what they're right, or maybe, yeah.
I think the fact that we have an unreliable, not narrator, but protagonist in terms of where he's been caught lying by us once, well, actually, probably a couple of times, if you want to think about him lying to Mara about mentioning the Canary.
To everyone.
Yeah, he's generally like you can't trust him.
He's a liar and a scoundrel.
We have the only time we really had a moment where he could have been vulnerable and we could have seen the real version of him is when he was with B2 Emo, where like
BYOB.
He had no reason to pretend or lie or something to that robot. But even then, we didn't get too much of it. But like that would be out of all the situations we've seen him in, that was probably the only time we could have seen him be actually who he is, because he's multi-faced, you know, a different person for every scenario.
Right. The only good thing we've seen him do for another person is saving Luthen in that warehouse action scene. Everything else he has done with every other person has negatively impacted them. I have not seen him do one good thing for another person. And that goes back to, I had a question and it felt bad, but it also kind of goes into the character that they are writing. So I have to give them the benefit of the doubt, where it's like, I haven't seen him shown any kind of regret over the things he's done to the people on Morlana, the situations he put them through because of his nonsense. And now he's just lead off to another place.
That reminded me there was even he almost did something good where like when he's taken apart from the junkyard and the guy with the dog comes and he's like, yo, I'll give you some of the money, you know, I'll hook you up with the
Right.
cash. And he's like, don't even give me your money, just get the hell out of here, just
Yeah,
like
just
take
get
that
the hell out
thing
of here.
and just leave, you know,
Because he's
like
like, dude, I don't want to get involved with all your nonsense. I know where
yeah,
this is gonna lead. Just
yeah.
get the hell out of here.
So like that,
He knows Cass really well.
yeah, so I actually I like that. Yeah, you're totally right.
Right.
I don't think we've seen him do anything besides that. That was like to show that like he is not a terrible human being. He's just a
Yeah.
person in a certain environment in a certain situation.
And he's just been brought up in like hard situations where
Yeah.
he's just become like a lone survivor from place to place to place to place. And like we
He's
find out where he's not been fighting, he was just a cook and he ran just to survive.
he's like the Solo, Han Solo from Solo, but like
So
done
that's
in a more serious, darker
yeah,
way, where like he had, you know, scoundrel who's
yeah.
been in the left, right in the
And he can
war.
pilot and he steals.
And yeah, and like you know, but like it's done so differently, which is kind of really cool to see.
I mentioned that I think
They
in the
could have been in the same
first
war,
episode.
like that war that Solo is in.
Yeah.
That could be the war that Cass is running away from.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned that in the first episode as well, where it just seems so much like what they may have wanted to do with Han Solo, but like just a real gritty version of who Han Solo is introduced to us as a seasoned smuggler type.
When are we gonna get the Poe Dameron show?
Oh my god, dude!
They're
Not
giving
even-
this guy the whole Han Solo treatment. They should have given this to Poe Dameron to an extent, but he would have
He's-
been way more like flashy and shit, not so
Yeah.
dark and serious.
exactly.
But
I think that's
still,
the thing.
I love Oscar Isaac, and I think he was done very dirty with that role.
I totally agree with you. I love Oscar Isaac so much in all the things I've seen him do. Such a great actor, and I mean they introduced him really well in The Force Awakens, and then it's like they didn't do anything with that, and you're like, come on, man. This was supposed to be clearly the new Han Solo. They've tried 2 new Han Solos now, where it's Poe Dameron first and then young Han Solo, but it's a new character, and they messed up both. And now Cassian is the third try, and it's the third charm. The third one's the charm, where it's like, okay, this is Han Solo, but he's just Hispanic. Okay, just get on with it.
The Dark Solo rises.
the dark Solo rises. That's what. Oh my god. So I had a yeah. Okay, I'll get into that. We should write that on the Dark Solo rises. Exactly. Oh my god. But yeah, man.
I think that should be it for this episode. I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
I think we both agree it was a great episode, and
Mhm.
we totally also are on the same page that it works totally as a standalone weekly episode. I hope they keep it up. I hope some of our predictions come true. I hope we see more worlds and they keep it fresh. And so far, I'm totally in. I'm ready for episode 5. You have me
Me
hooked.
too.
And this might be some of the best Star Wars content we've had since The Mandalorian. And it's going to be interesting by the end to like compare the two, and if it keeps this quality up to we see like Mandalorian will still be great, but like comparing the two, like it might not
I like
be
this
as
better.
Yeah, so far I think it has a way better start. The beginning of Mandalorian was pretty rough, where it was like, oh, we're doing Monster of the Week, but like you have this huge setup in episode 1, and like, what are we even doing? What is the show? And then like, in between, there's an episode where it's like, oh no, but like that main plot device is still very important. And then we go back to Monster of the Week, and then at the very end they wrap it up, and you're like, okay. So there was a story that was 3 episodes worth, and then a bunch of like hopping around. Where like season 2 was then amazing because they finally combined the two. Where like it was still Monster of the Week, but it was moving the plot forward, and it was bringing in really, really interesting parts of the Star Wars universe. Where this, it feels just like a more singular vision, where it seems like they thought this out. It reminds me more of something like Breaking Bad, where like when they started writing Breaking Bad, they knew how it was going to end. And I get the feeling here where we know it's going to end in Rogue One, but I think they also know what the the final episode of this show is going to be. And they're working their way backwards towards that, which At least I don't know if that's true, but it gives me that feeling because it seems so thought out. It seems like
Yeah,
you said, where like it gives us doubts just to clear it and give us other things to question. And
right.
that's good writing. That's what keeps you
Yeah,
interested. You give some people like things to feel satisfied that you were there, you had the question, you were there for the ride, but like you also don't make it that like now you know everything, and like
yeah.
this is
It
like
raises
a
new
setup.
questions now that
Yeah,
and not in like an annoying way where it's like, oh, now we have new questions to answer, like what the
yeah,
hell
it's
we
all
just
very
answered.
organic, like you
It's
said.
yeah, it's very it's like I was just gonna say like how it's literally like it's just like a regular spy thriller show that you would have
Yeah,
like how someone just thinks of, like you said, Breaking Bad, or like you just think of like a show and it's just got Star Wars attached to it, and the fact that they've been able to like Mandalorian was a start to good Star Wars, back to good Star Wars. And I think this has taken it a step further where it's like, this is like a real gritty version of Mandalorian, but like a full thought out plot, characters. And now it's like, now how do we put them in Star Wars? Where it's like
yeah,
they have a show, they have everything written, and it's like, but it's not. And while I'm saying this, I don't want people to think like it's also not in the way where it's like it was a spy thriller script which they're dropping into Star Wars universe. It's like everything is integrated together so perfectly where it's like it's literally just like a grounded serious spy thriller drama in Star Wars. And I don't know, even saying those words make it sound like weird,
it,
but they've managed to combine those all those elements
it's just
and keep it amazing.
they found this beautiful balance of doing
Right,
something completely new in terms of in
right,
Star Wars, where in not just it's the themes, the looks, the characters, the storytelling, all of
right,
it is so fresh for Star Wars, but at the same time, at no point ever are you like, this is not Star Wars. Like this does not belong in
right.
this universe. Like this doesn't make
Exactly.
sense for everything that has come before. And that is such a hard balance, I'm sure is
Right.
like to hit. Like hats off,
Dude,
and it's great.
given the amount of Star Wars content there is and the amount of fluctuating Star Wars content there in terms of like what kind of, not just good and bad, but what kind of content, like you said, it is amazing that they've able to balance all this out and introduce all the elements. Like we're only in episode 4 now. Like first I was like, okay, 3 episodes that all seem the same thing in just one location, right? With just a couple of here and there. That just seemed like sort of Blade Runner, but with Star Wars attached to it. Now it's like we're getting introduced to so much actual Star Wars stuff, and it's like, how have they managed to do this where it's not feeling out of place at all? Other than that one scene, like everything about the characters, the look, the story, every single thing is so perfectly blended together that yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing like where all these. I don't even care how the plot goes because we sort of know how the main character is going to end at some point. But I'm just interested in seeing all these new. I never thought I would be interested in new characters named with all these funky Star Wars names, but here we are. I'm like super into it. I'm like, I can't wait to see what Luthen's up to. I can't wait to see what happens to Mon Mothma. Obviously, I can't wait to see what happens to Karn, my
Yeah.
favorite dude. Like in any recent show, I
Like
don't think I've been so interested in a new character in
remember
any recent show.
he went from being like as Karn a terrible actor to being like he's my
Yes,
favorite guy in the show now.
and it's like the fact that we questioned is he a terrible actor was by design. That's the
Yeah.
perfect part about it. It's not like, oh, he looked like a bad actor in the beginning but he sort of picked up. It's like even that moment of bad acting is Karn, the character, acting in that scene. He's trying to act like a cool soldier when now we know that he's not that. He's just like a sad sap. He was just trying to look cool, and that's why he came across as a bad actor, because even in real life he couldn't portray it as much as he tried to.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they have me hooked like that with a. They've already done a full arc from there to now with a villain who we thought would be like the cool villain. He would be like the Sith type villain. He's like this dude, you know? And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I feel so bad for him. And you see like all these Imperials, white collared Imperials, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's pretty great. I'm looking forward to episode 5. I think all the debate between 1 versus 3 episodes at a time and all that, I think that can be put to rest. I think we're on board with each episode. Obviously, we have to wait and see how the next episode goes. But so far, I think I'm gonna give them the benefit to say that they'll accomplish it properly.
And I still think the first 3 episodes had to be dropped together. That had to be by design.
Oh yeah. My only question now is like, did they need 2 episodes, all 3 or 2?
Yeah, you have a good point with that one.
So far, I think 2 episodes would have been fine, because like it's like we didn't need to spend an hour and a half in that one place going through so much detail and so much character stuff that,
Well, you don't know
because
yet.
that's my thing, where I'm going to give them the because especially now that we know that the Imperials are searching for the Star Path, and they might go back to we're definitely going to go back to Morlana, and how Bix and Marva and all these people interact with the new characters. We already know how those people feel, so we don't have to see all that happen in the later episodes. So yeah man. And another thing was, the last thing was that what was I saying? I completely forgot it, but it's okay.
Well, maybe you'll remember it before episode 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's our thoughts so far for this episode. Like I said, I think we both really like it. Yeah, I think we both can't wait for episode 5. So let's see how that goes. So
Yeah, I can't wait for episode 5. That's true.
in the meantime, why don't you sign us out so that we can come back here soon enough and do episode 5? Because I can't wait.
Yes, I can't wait either for episode 5. I am so pumped. I'm gonna leave the viewers with just those questions of whether all those episodes were important or all that stuff, and you guys can chew on that later on. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you tune in for the next for all the next episodes, and click subscribe, ring the notification bell, rate us, leave comments, do all that jazz. We want all of it. And thanks for listening. This is your host, Root and Shabz, signing out.
Peace, everybody.
Peace out. Take care, everyone.